The moment Nathan Cole's phone lit up with that unfamiliar number, he had no idea he was about to meet the woman who would destroy everything he'd carefully rebuilt and give him the only thing worth breaking for. This is the story of a widowed father who thought he'd closed the door on risk, and a billionaire who'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. It's about the dangerous space between two worlds, where one storm changes everything. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this journey travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The phone rang at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, which was already wrong. Nathan Cole had been awake since 5:30, making breakfast for his 7-year-old son, Charlie, who sat at their small kitchen table swinging his legs and pushing scrambled eggs around his plate with the concentration of a surgeon. The morning light came thin and gold through the window overlooking the lake, turning the water into hammered copper. This was Nathan's favorite time of day, before the world pressed in with its demands, when it was just him and Charlie and the quiet rhythm they'd built together over 3 years of learning how to be enough for each other. The phone's buzz shattered that peace like a rock through glass. Nathan glanced at the screen. Unknown number, local area code. He almost let it go to voicemail. He'd learned the hard way that unexpected calls rarely brought good news, but something made him answer. Hello? Mr. Cole? The voice was female, cultured, with the kind of precise diction that suggested either expensive education or careful practice. My name is Isabel Vaughn. I was given your number by Tom Hendricks at the hardware store. I understand you do carpentry and general home repair. Nathan wiped his hands on a dish towel, his mind already cataloging what jobs he had scheduled. That's right. What do you need done? There was a pause, just a beat too long. When she spoke again, her voice carried a tension he couldn't quite identify. I've recently purchased the old Morrison place on the North Shore. It needs extensive work. The deck is rotting in places, the roof has damage, and there are structural issues I'm told require someone with your particular skill set. The Morrison place. Nathan knew it well. Everyone in Willow Bay did. The massive lake house had sat empty for nearly a decade after old William Morrison died, his children having scattered to cities that mattered more than this small town. The place had good bones but bad ghosts, or so the local kids said. He'd driven past it a few times recently and noticed signs of new life. Fresh paint, landscaping crews, expensive cars in the driveway. When would you like me to come take a look? Today, if possible. Again, that thread of something beneath the words. Not quite urgency, more like control beginning to fray. I can pay whatever your rate is, plus a premium for short notice. And Mr. Cole? Tom mentioned you're discreet, that you don't gossip or ask unnecessary questions. Is that accurate? Nathan's grip tightened on the phone. In his experience, people who paid for discretion usually had something to hide, but he also knew that bills didn't pay themselves, and Charlie's school fees were due next week. He looked at his son, who was now making his eggs dance across the plate like tiny yellow choreographers. I do good work and mind my own business, Nathan said carefully. That's all I can promise. That's all I need. Can you be here at 10? I can. Thank you, Mr. Cole. She gave him the address, though he already knew it, and hung up before he could say anything else. Nathan stood in his kitchen, phone still in hand, watching the light change on the water. Charlie looked up at him with eyes the same shade of hazel as his mother's had been. New job, Dad? Maybe, buddy. We'll see. What Nathan didn't know, what he couldn't have known as he finished making Charlie's lunch and drove him to his grandmother's house for the day, was that the woman on the phone had made 17 calls to various contractors before Tom Hendricks finally gave her Nathan's number, that she'd been awake all night, pacing the empty rooms of her new house, trying to convince herself that hiding was strategy and not cowardice, that she'd practiced her introduction 3 times before dialing, trying to sound like someone who belonged in a town like this, who could ask for help without revealing how desperately she needed it. And Nathan definitely didn't know that by the time autumn leaves began to fall, that phone call would have changed everything he thought he knew about safety, about risk, and about whether his heart had room for anything beyond survival. The Morrison place looked different up close. Nathan pulled his truck into the circular driveway at 9:58, deliberately early, but not too early. The house rose 3 stories above the shoreline, all windows and weathered cedar shingles, the kind of place that whispered old money even in its decay. Someone had been working on it. The lawn was manicured, the flower beds weeded, the front porch swept clean. But the bones still showed their age. Sagging gutters, cracked window frames, a deck that wrapped around the lakeside with boards that looked like they'd give way if you breathed on them wrong. He'd brought his tools, his measuring tape, his notepad for estimates. What he hadn't brought was any expectation of who might answer the door. She opened it before he could knock. Isabel Vaughn was nothing like what Nathan had imagined. For some reason, the voice on the phone had made him picture someone older, severe, the kind of wealthy eccentric who bought lake houses on a whim and then complained about the wildlife. Instead, the woman standing in the doorway looked to be in her late 30s, tall and slim in jeans and a white linen shirt that probably cost more than his truck payment. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that looked effortless, but probably wasn't. She wore no jewelry except small diamond studs in her ears, no makeup that he could detect, and an expression that seemed to be weighing whether answering the door had been a mistake. "Mr. Cole." She stepped back to let him in. "Thank you for coming." "Just Nathan is fine." He followed her into an entryway that still smelled of fresh paint. The interior was a work in progress. Some rooms completely renovated, others still gutted and waiting. "You've done a lot already." "I've had crews working for the past month." She led him through the house toward the lakeside windows. "But they finished their contract last week, and I found that I prefer fewer people around." There it was again, that careful choice of words like someone translating from a language only she spoke. Nathan made a mental note and said nothing. The deck was worse than he'd thought. Several boards had rotted completely through, and the support post showed water damage that went deep. He knelt down, testing the structure with his hands, already doing calculations in his head. "This needs to be completely rebuilt," he said, standing and brushing sawdust from his jeans. "The rot's gone too far to just replace boards. You're looking at new posts, new joists, new decking, and we'll need to see what the damage did to the house foundation where it connects." Isabel stood in the open doorway, arms crossed, watching him with an intensity that felt like being studied. "How long?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. Depends on weather and what we find when we start pulling things apart. He pulled out his notepad. "I can work up a detailed estimate by tomorrow if you want to." "I don't need an estimate." She said it flatly, like someone used to making decisions without debate. "I need the deck safe and the roof repaired before winter. Whatever it costs, it costs. I just need to know you can start soon and work consistently." Nathan paused, his pen hovering over the paper. "Ms. Vaughn, I appreciate the business, but I don't work without estimates. It protects both of us. You need to know what you're paying for, and I need documentation for materials and labor. It's how I do things." For a moment, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe? Or the kind of respect that came from being told no when you were used to hearing yes. "Of course, that's reasonable. Tomorrow is fine for the estimate." She turned to look out at the lake, her profile sharp against the bright water. Nathan found himself noticing the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped her crossed arms just a little too tight. This was a woman holding something together through sheer force of will. "Can I ask why you bought this place?" The question was out before he could stop it, violating his own rule about minding his business. She didn't turn around. "Does it matter?" "No," he admitted. "Just curious. Most people who buy houses here have some connection to Willow Bay, family or childhood summers or something. The Morrison place has been empty a long time." "I have no connection here." Her voice was quiet. "That's exactly why I chose it." Nathan recognized the shape of that answer, even if he didn't understand the details. He knew about running to places with no memories attached. After Sarah died, he'd considered it himself, packing up Charlie and starting over somewhere they'd never been together, somewhere her ghost didn't wait around every corner. But in the end, he'd stayed because running didn't actually solve anything. It just changed the geography of grief. "I'll have the estimate ready by noon tomorrow," he said, giving her the gift of a subject change. "And if you approve it, I can start Monday. I work 7 to 3 most days. I have to pick my son up from school, but I'll put in full days and I'll clean up after myself. You won't even know I'm here." Isabel turned then, and he caught something in her expression that looked almost like relief. That would be perfect. Thank you, Nathan. She walked him back to the front door, and they shook hands in the formal way of people establishing a business relationship. Her grip was firm, her palm cool despite the summer heat. Nathan noticed she wore no rings, not even the pale band of skin that showed where one had recently been. One more thing, she said as he reached his truck. Tom Hendricks mentioned you were discreet. I need you to understand that I chose this town specifically because no one here knows me. I'd like to keep it that way. If anyone asks about this job, I'd appreciate it if you could keep the details to yourself. Nathan studied her for a moment. The woman standing in front of him was afraid of something. That much was clear. Whether she was hiding from danger or shame or just the weight of her own past, he couldn't tell. But he understood the desire to be unknown, to move through the world without the burden of other people's knowledge. I'm here to fix your deck, he said simply. That's all anyone needs to know. The smile she gave him was small but genuine. Thank you. Well, Nathan spent that evening working on the estimate at his kitchen table while Charlie built increasingly elaborate Lego structures on the living room floor. The numbers were straightforward, materials from Tom's hardware store, labor calculated at his usual rate, timeline based on best and worst case scenarios. But his mind kept drifting back to the woman in the doorway, to the way she'd looked at the lake like it was both refuge and prison. His mother-in-law, Linda, called at 7:30, her usual check-in time. How is Charlie today? Nathan asked, wedging the phone between his ear and shoulder as he wrote. Perfect as always. We made cookies and read 3 chapters of that wizard book he loves. Linda paused. I heard you got called out to the old Morrison place. Is that the new job? Nathan shouldn't have been surprised. In Willow Bay, news traveled faster than weather across the lake. Yeah, deck repair, some roofing work. Should keep me busy for a few weeks. Tom's wife mentioned the new owner is some kind of investor, from the city. The words carried the gentle judgment of someone who'd lived in the same small town for 60 years and found the outside world perpetually suspect. Rich, apparently. Paid cash for the whole property. I wouldn't know about that, Nathan said, keeping his voice neutral. I'm just there to fix what's broken. Linda was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that meant she was deciding whether to push. Just be careful, honey. People don't usually buy houses in towns where they have no connections. Makes you wonder what they're running from. After they hung up, Nathan sat staring at the estimate, Linda's words echoing in his head. He thought about Isabel's request for discretion, her careful answers, the way she'd specifically said she had no connection to Willow Bay. In his experience, the wealthy didn't usually do their own running. They hired people for that. So what was she doing here, alone in a too-big house, asking a local carpenter to rebuild her deck and keep her secrets? It wasn't his business. He'd learned that the hard way over the years, caring about other people's problems didn't make them your responsibility. His responsibility was Charlie, was keeping their small life stable and safe and predictable. Everything else was just weather passing through. But as he finished the estimate and sent it to the email address Isabel had provided, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just agreed to something that would turn out to be far more complicated than replacing rotted wood. Isabel approved the estimate in less than an hour, her response containing exactly 7 words. This is perfect. See you Monday. IV. Nathan started work at 7 a.m., sharp, pulling into the driveway just as the morning mist was lifting off the lake. The house looked different in the early light, softer somehow, less severe. He'd half expected Isabel to be waiting, but the place was quiet, all the curtains drawn. He unloaded his tools, set up sawhorses, and began the methodical work of tearing out the old deck. This was the part he liked best, the destructive phase, where you could see exactly how bad the damage was without any pretty surfaces hiding the truth. He worked steadily, pulling up boards and examining the structure underneath, making mental notes of what would need to be replaced. Around 8:30, the back door opened and Isabel emerged carrying a glass of water and a coffee mug. She was dressed similarly to before, jeans and a simple shirt, but her hair was loose around her shoulders and she looked like she hadn't slept much. I thought you might need this, she said, holding out the water. Thanks. Nathan wiped sawdust from his hands and took it, drinking half in one go. The summer heat was already building. Isabel stood there, coffee cradled in both hands, watching him work with that same intense focus. How bad is it? About what I thought. The good news is the foundation connection is solid. No damage to the house structure. Bad news is every support post needs to be replaced, and about 60% of the joists. Whoever built this originally did good work, but water's patient. Give it enough time and it'll find every weakness. That sounds like a metaphor. Nathan glanced up, surprised by the comment. I guess it does. Hadn't thought about it that way. She almost smiled. Sorry, hazard of spending too much time alone. You start finding meaning in everything. How long have you been here? 6 weeks. Most of it with construction crews making noise all day. The quiet's been... She trailed off, looking out at the lake. Different. Nathan went back to pulling boards, giving her space to either continue or retreat. He'd learned early in his contracting work that some clients wanted conversation and some wanted to be invisible. Isabel seemed like she couldn't decide which category she belonged in. Can I ask you something? She said after a moment. And please tell me if I'm overstepping. Go ahead. Tom mentioned you're raising your son alone. Is his mother... She died 3 years ago. Nathan said it matter-of-factly, the way he'd learned to when people asked. No drama, no invitation for pity. Car accident, drunk driver ran a red light downtown. Charlie was 2. Isabel's expression shifted, not to sympathy exactly, but to recognition, like she understood the specific weight of that kind of loss. I'm sorry, that must have been devastating. It was. Nathan set down his crowbar and looked at her directly. Still is some days, but you learn to build around it, like structural damage. You can't always fix it completely, but you can make sure the rest stays standing. Is that what you're doing? Building around it? The question was more perceptive than he'd expected. Nathan took another drink of water, buying time to decide how honest to be with this woman he barely knew. I'm doing what my son needs me to do. Some days that's enough. Isabel nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she already suspected. I should let you work. I just wanted to... She gestured vaguely at the water glass. I don't know, make sure you had what you needed. I'm good. Thank you. She retreated back into the house, and Nathan returned to the demolition. But he found himself wondering what she'd really been asking, and what answers she'd been hoping for. The days developed a rhythm. Nathan arrived at 7, worked until noon, took a lunch break on the dock while Isabel stayed invisible inside, then worked until 3 when he had to leave for Charlie's pickup. Isabel appeared occasionally, bringing water, asking brief questions about progress, standing on the partially completed deck, and staring at the lake like it held answers to questions Nathan couldn't hear. They didn't talk much beyond the necessary updates about materials and timeline. But Nathan noticed things anyway. The way she seemed to relax as the morning went on, like something about watching him work calmed a restlessness in her. The fact that she ate lunch at exactly 12:30 every day, always on the screened porch, always alone. The expensive car in the garage that never moved, as if she'd driven here once and decided the world beyond Willow Bay no longer existed. By the end of the first week, the old deck was completely removed and Nathan had begun setting the new foundation posts. It was satisfying work, the kind where you could see progress every day, where the result of your labor was something solid and useful. He'd forgotten how much he needed that kind of clarity. On Friday afternoon, as he was packing up his tools, Isabel came out with 2 bottles of beer from what Nathan suspected was a very expensive collection. Do you drink? She asked. Or is that inappropriate to offer your contractor? Nathan hesitated. He'd been so careful to keep every client relationship purely professional since Sarah died. No blurred lines, no personal connections that could complicate the clean transaction of work for money. But something about the way Isabel stood there, holding out a peace offering she clearly wasn't sure would be accepted, made him break his own rule. 1 beer seems reasonable, he said, taking the bottle. They sat on the dock, the one structure he hadn't had to rebuild yet, with their feet hanging over the water. The late afternoon sun turned everything gold, and the lake was so still it looked like hammered metal. Thank you, Isabel said after a long silence. For the work, obviously, but also for not asking questions. You hired me to fix your deck, not interrogate you. Still, most people can't resist the urge to pry. She took a sip of her beer, her eyes fixed on the horizon. In my regular life, I'm surrounded by people who think they're entitled to know everything about me. Every decision, Every thought, every moment of weakness. Coming here was supposed to be about stepping away from that. Nathan considered his response carefully. Is it working? I don't know yet. She turned to look at him, and for the first time since they'd met, her expression was unguarded. I keep waiting to feel different. Calmer, maybe. Or at least clear about why I ran. But mostly I just feel like I'm holding my breath underwater, waiting to see how long I can last before I have to come up for air. The honesty in her voice caught Nathan off guard. This wasn't polite client small talk. This was something real breaking through carefully maintained walls. He recognized it because he'd felt it himself in the months after Sarah died, when well-meaning friends would ask, "How are you doing?" And he'd want to scream that he was drowning, that every day was a battle to keep his head above water for Charlie's sake. You know what helped me, he said quietly. After my wife died, I kept thinking I needed to get back to normal, that eventually the grief would pass and I'd feel like myself again. But my therapist told me that was bullshit, that there is no going back, only forward into whatever shape your life takes now. The trick isn't waiting to feel okay. It's learning to build something new while you still feel broken. Isabel stared at him for a long moment. That's either very wise or very sad. Probably both. She laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. It transformed her face completely, erasing the careful control and leaving someone younger and more vulnerable behind. How old is your son now? 7. Charlie, he's... Nathan smiled despite himself. He's the reason I get up in the morning. The reason any of this matters. What's he like? Curious about everything, terrible at sitting still, makes friends with literally every person he meets because he hasn't learned yet that not everyone deserves his trust. Nathan's voice softened. He looks exactly like his mother. Same eyes, same smile. Sometimes it's hard seeing her in him every day, but mostly it's a gift. Isabel went very quiet. You're lucky to have that piece of her still alive. The weight in her words suggested a story Nathan knew better than to ask about. Instead, he finished his beer and stood, offering her a hand up from the dock. I should get going. Charlie's with his grandmother today, but I like to pick him up before dinner. Of course. She let him pull her up, and they walked back to the house together. Same time Monday? Same time Monday. As Nathan drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw Isabel standing in the driveway, watching him leave. She looked smaller somehow, more alone. He told himself it wasn't his problem, that everyone had their own grief to carry, and he had enough of his own. But the image of her standing there, surrounded by a house too big for one person and a silence too heavy to bear, stayed with him all weekend. The second week brought rain. It started Monday morning as a light drizzle and built to a steady downpour by noon, turning the exposed deck structure into a muddy disaster and forcing Nathan to work under a tarp he'd strung between sawhorses. The rhythm of rain on plastic became its own kind of meditation as he measured and cut and fitted the new support beams. Isabel appeared around 11 with a thermos of coffee and a question that seemed to cost her something to ask. Would you like to work inside today? I have a covered porch on the east side. It's dry, and you could still access your materials from the garage. Nathan looked up from his work, water dripping from the brim of his cap. The offer was practical. Working in the rain was miserable and inefficient, but accepting meant crossing a threshold they'd both been carefully avoiding, from outdoor contractor to someone actually inside her private space. That would help, he said finally. If you're sure. I'm sure. The covered porch turned out to be more of a solarium, all windows and comfortable furniture, with doors that opened directly to where Nathan had been staging materials. It was warm and dry, and smelled like the lavender Isabel apparently kept in small bowls around the house. He set up his work area in one corner, trying to take up as little space as possible. Isabel brought her laptop and settled at the opposite end with a blanket and what looked like financial reports. They worked in companionable silence, the rain providing a constant backdrop, occasionally glancing up when thunder rumbled across the lake. Around 1 o'clock, Nathan's phone buzzed. Charlie's school, the caller ID alone enough to make his heart rate spike. Excuse me, he said to Isabel, stepping into the hallway. Hello? Mr. Cole, this is Nurse Janet at Willow Bay Elementary. Charlie's fine, she added quickly, clearly familiar with parents' instant panic. but he's running a fever and complaining of a sore throat. We need someone to pick him up. Nathan checked his watch. It was barely past lunch. He had at least 2 more hours of productive work time if the rain let up. But Charlie came first. Charlie always came first. I'll be there in 15 minutes. When he returned to the porch, Isabel was watching him with concern. Everything okay? My son's sick. I need to go get him from school. Nathan started packing his tools, mentally calculating how much time he'd lose today and whether he could make it up over the weekend. I'll be back tomorrow if he's feeling better. If not, it might be Wednesday. I'm sorry for the delay. Stop. Isabel stood, setting aside her laptop. You don't need to apologize for taking care of your child. That's not how this works. I know, but the timeline. Nathan. She said his name with unexpected firmness. The deck can wait. Your son can't. Go. He wanted to argue, to explain that falling behind meant delayed payment meant bills piling up, but the look on her face stopped him. She wasn't being patronizing or dismissive. She understood exactly what he was weighing and was telling him the choice had already been made. Thank you, he said quietly. Text me and let me know how he's doing. Nathan paused at the door. You want me to text you about my sick kid? Only if you want to. Isabel's expression shifted to something almost uncertain. Yes, I'd like to know he's okay. It was such a simple request, but it felt like it meant something more. Nathan nodded and left, driving through the rain toward his son, his mind already shifting to Charlie's needs. Medicine, soup, keeping him comfortable, probably staying up half the night monitoring his fever. He didn't think about Isabel again until 9 that evening, when Charlie was finally asleep and the house was quiet. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a simple message. Fever broke. He's sleeping. Thank you for understanding. Her response came within minutes. I'm glad he's all right. Take tomorrow off too, just in case. We're not on any schedule but your own. Nathan stared at the message for a long time. In 3 years of contract work since Sarah's death, not one client had ever told him to prioritize his son without calculating the cost. Most were polite about it, but couldn't hide their frustration at delays. Isabel had simply understood. He typed back, thank you. That means more than you know. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, get some rest, Nathan. He did, for the first time in weeks, without the weight of tomorrow's obligations pressing on his chest. Charlie recovered quickly, the way kids do, bouncing back to full energy by Wednesday morning. Nathan returned to work feeling behind schedule, but somehow less anxious about it. Isabel had meant what she said about timelines. The urgency that colored their first conversation had evaporated into something more patient. How's Charlie? She asked when he arrived, and the genuine interest in her voice made it clear she actually wanted to know. Back to his usual chaos. He asked me this morning why rain doesn't fall up, and I realized I have no idea how to explain gravity to a 7-year-old. Isabel laughed. My father used to say that children ask the questions adults forget are worth asking. Your father sounds wise. He was. The past tense sat heavy between them. He died when I was 15. Heart attack in his office, surrounded by the company he'd built from nothing. Nathan stopped what he was doing, recognizing the offering for what it was, a small piece of her story, traded for the piece he'd already given. I'm sorry. It's been 23 years. You'd think it would hurt less by now. She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture he'd noticed she did when talking about things that mattered. But some losses don't fade. They just become part of your architecture. Like structural damage you build around, Nathan said, echoing his own words back to her. Exactly like that. Her smile was sad but real. I've spent most of my adult life trying to be what he wanted me to be, building his company bigger, making the kind of decisions he would have made. But lately I've been wondering what I'm building for, if it's all just monument to someone who isn't here to see it. Nathan understood that feeling, the weight of carrying someone else's dreams because your own got buried with them. After Sarah died, he'd tried so hard to be both parents to Charlie, to fill every gap her absence left. It had taken him months to realize that wasn't possible, that trying to be everything only meant failing at everything. Can I tell you something? He said carefully. After my wife died, people kept saying I needed to stay strong for Charlie, that I couldn't fall apart because he needed me. And they were right, but they were also wrong, because pretending I was okay taught him that grief was something to hide. It wasn't until I let him see me cry, see me struggle, that he started being able to process his own feelings. Isabel absorbed this quietly. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe the question isn't what you're building for. Maybe it's whether you're building what you actually want, or just what you think you're supposed to want. The words hung in the air between them, more honest than Nathan had intended. Isabel stared at him with an expression he couldn't read, something between gratitude and fear, like he'd just voiced a thought she'd been trying not to have. I should let you work, she said finally, her voice tight. She disappeared inside, and Nathan kicked himself for overstepping. This was exactly why he kept client relationships professional. Because the moment you started caring about their actual lives, you said things that mattered and couldn't be unsaid. But an hour later, Isabel returned with lunch, homemade sandwiches and lemonade, the kind of gesture that said she wasn't angry, just processing. They ate on the partially completed deck, watching clouds move across the lake. I built my father's company into something 3 times what he left, she said without preamble. Turned his regional investment firm into a national player. Made deals that made headlines. And then last year, my board tried to force me out because I refused to back a merger that would have made us all incredibly rich, but would have destroyed everything my father actually believed in. Nathan waited, sensing there was more. I won the fight, kept my position, kept control, but it cost me everything else. Friendships, my marriage, any privacy I might have had. The business press turned it into a circus. They called me ruthless, cold, a corporate shark, and the worst part? Her voice cracked slightly. Most of it was true. I became exactly what I needed to be to win, and then I looked around and realized I didn't recognize my own life anymore. So you came here, Nathan said quietly. So I came here. To a town where no one knows me, where I don't have to be Isabel Vaughn, the Ice Queen CEO, where maybe I could figure out who I am when I'm not fighting. And have you figured it out? She turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Not yet, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm breathing real air. Nathan understood then why she'd hired him specifically. Why she needed someone who wouldn't ask questions, who would just show up and do steady, honest work while she figured out how to exist outside the armor she'd built. He represented something she'd lost. Simplicity, reliability, a life built on smaller, realer things. You know what's funny? He said, surprising himself. I spent so long thinking my life was small, that losing Sarah and ending up here, raising Charlie alone in a town where nothing ever changes, was some kind of failure. Like I'd given up on the bigger dreams we had. And now? Now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe the small stuff. Making breakfast, helping with homework, building a deck that'll last through winters. Maybe that's not settling. Maybe that's just real. Isabel reached out and touched his hand just briefly. Thank you for saying that. The contact lasted only a second, but Nathan felt it like an electric current. Not romantic, at least not yet, but something that mattered. A recognition of shared understanding between 2 people who'd both lost their way and were trying to find it again. After that day, something shifted between them. The deck took shape board by board, and so did their friendship, if that's what it was. Isabel started spending more time outside while Nathan worked. She'd bring her laptop or a book and settle into one of the chairs he'd salvaged and restored, just existing in the same space. Sometimes they talked, about nothing important, just the easy conversation of people learning each other's rhythms. Other times they worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only develops between people who don't need words to fill every moment. Nathan told her about Charlie's obsession with space, how his son wanted to be an astronaut despite being afraid of heights. Isabel told him about growing up in her father's shadow, about the pressure of inheriting expectations instead of just money. They traded stories about grief and guilt and the strange ways people tried to fix things that couldn't be fixed. Linda noticed the change first. You seem lighter lately, she said one evening when Nathan picked up Charlie. Is it the new job? It's good work, Nathan said carefully. Interesting project. Tom's wife says the woman who bought the Morrison place is very private. Barely leaves the house, apparently. Linda's tone was carefully neutral, but Nathan knew his mother-in-law well enough to hear the question underneath. Must be lonely, being in a new place all alone. I wouldn't know. We don't really talk much. It was a lie, or at least a significant omission, but Nathan couldn't quite explain to Linda that he'd somehow become the confidant of a woman he barely knew, that their conversations had started meaning something he couldn't name. It felt too fragile to expose to scrutiny, like bringing a butterfly into harsh light. By the end of the third week, the deck was nearly complete. Nathan had rebuilt it stronger than the original, with proper drainage and treated wood that would last decades. He'd also fixed the roof damage, replaced 2 window frames that had rotted through, and reinforced the dock where support posts had started to fail. "It's beautiful," Isabel said, walking the perimeter of the finished deck on a Friday afternoon. "Better than I imagined." "It'll hold." Nathan felt the satisfaction of work well done. "Should be good for 20, 30 years if you maintain the stain. Will you teach me?" "How to maintain it?" The question surprised him. "You want to learn deck maintenance?" "I want to know how to take care of the things that matter." She looked at him directly. "I'm tired of paying other people to care about my life." So that evening, after Charlie was in bed, Nathan returned to the Morrison place with samples of stain and sealant, brushes, and rags. He showed Isabel how to test the wood, how to apply the stain evenly, how to work with the grain instead of against it. She listened intently, taking notes on her phone, asking specific questions about weather and timing and how to tell when something needed attention. They ended up sitting on the newly finished deck as the sun set, both of them speckled with stain, the lake turning purple in the fading light. "Can I ask you something personal?" Isabel said. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair enough." She drew her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller. "Do you ever regret staying here? In Willow Bay, I mean. You could have started over anywhere, taken Charlie somewhere bigger, somewhere with more opportunities." Nathan considered the question seriously. "I thought about it. Right after Sarah died, I made a whole plan. We'd move to Portland or Seattle, somewhere I could disappear into a bigger pond. But then I realized I was just running from the grief instead of dealing with it. And Charlie needed his grandmother, needed familiar faces and places, stability. But what did you need?" No one had asked him that before. Not once in 3 years. Everyone had focused on what Charlie needed, what was best for the grieving child, how Nathan needed to stay strong for his son's sake. The question of what Nathan himself needed had been so thoroughly buried that he'd forgotten it existed. "I needed to remember that Sarah loved this town," he said slowly, "that our life here wasn't a failure just because it wasn't big or impressive. She used to say that the lake was like a heartbeat, steady and necessary and easy to forget until it stops. I stayed because leaving felt like saying our life together didn't matter." Isabel was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I left my entire life behind because staying made me into someone I hated. I don't know if that's brave or cowardly. Maybe it's both. Maybe brave things always feel like cowardice until you're far enough away to see what they cost." "Is that your therapist talking, or you?" Nathan smiled. "Little bit of both." She leaned her head on his shoulder, casual, seeking comfort rather than something more. Nathan froze for just a second, then relaxed into it, letting the contact be what it was. 2 lonely people finding brief respite from their separate storms. They sat that way until full dark, not talking, just breathing together and listening to the lake lap against the shore. When Isabel finally pulled away, her eyes were wet. "Thank you," she said. "For everything, the deck, the honesty, the not asking questions until I was ready to answer them." "You're welcome." Nathan stood, offering her a hand up. "I'll be back Monday to do the final inspection and cleanup. After that, the job's done." Something flickered across Isabel's face. Disappointment, maybe, or fear at what came after the safe structure of contractor and client ended. Right. Of course. As Nathan drove home, he realized he felt the same fear. For 3 weeks, he'd had a reason to show up at the Morrison place every day, a framework that justified the hours spent in Isabel's company. Once the job was done, that framework disappeared. They'd just be two people who'd accidentally become important to each other with no clear path forward. The weekend stretched long and strange. Charlie kept asking when they could go see the lake house lady, and Nathan found himself making excuses about why they couldn't. The truth was, he didn't know how to explain Isabel to his son, how to introduce this private, complicated woman into their small, simple life. Sunday evening brought unexpected rain, not the steady downpour from weeks before, but a violent summer storm that rolled across the lake with wind and lightning. Nathan put Charlie to bed, then stood at his window watching trees bend and twist in the gusts. His phone rang at 10:47 p.m. Isabel's number. "Nathan?" Her voice was tight with controlled panic. "I'm so sorry to call this late, but I think something's wrong with the deck. There's this creaking sound and the railing feels loose, and I don't know if it's just the storm or if... I'll be right there." He called Linda, explained the emergency, waited until she arrived to stay with Charlie. Then he drove through the storm toward the Morrison place, windshield wipers barely keeping up with the rain, his mind running through structural calculations. The deck was solid. He'd checked every joint, every post, but high winds could expose weakness in ways normal conditions didn't. Isabel was waiting in the doorway when he arrived, and even through the rain he could see her fear. Not about the deck, he realized. About being alone in the storm, in the big house, with no one to call except the carpenter she'd hired. "Show me," he said, following her out to the deck. The railing was fine, just expanding and contracting in the humidity, making noises that sounded alarming but weren't dangerous. Nathan checked every connection point anyway, testing the structure against the wind, making sure nothing had come loose. "It's solid," he said finally, shouting to be heard over the storm. "Just storm sounds, nothing to worry about." They retreated inside, both soaking wet. Isabel brought towels and they stood in her kitchen dripping on the tile. "I feel ridiculous now," she said, "calling you out here in the middle of the night for nothing." "It wasn't nothing. You were scared." Nathan dried his hair, hyper-aware that they were alone together at night for the first time, that something about the storm had stripped away the usual careful distance between them. "Better to check and be wrong than ignore it and be right. I'm not usually like this. Afraid, I mean." Isabel wrapped the towel around her shoulders like armor. "In my regular life, I'm the person who makes decisions under pressure, who stays calm when everyone else is panicking. But here, alone in this house, every sound feels threatening." "That's not fear of the house," Nathan said gently. "That's just what happens when you stop moving fast enough to outrun your thoughts." She looked at him with something like recognition. "Is that what you did? After Sarah died?" "For about 6 months, I worked 80-hour weeks, took every job I could find, stayed busy enough that I didn't have to think about what came next. Then Charlie's teacher called and said he was acting out in school, and I realized running wasn't protecting him. It was teaching him that problems disappear if you ignore them long enough." "What changed?" "I stopped." Nathan set down the towel, his voice soft. "Just stopped. Let myself feel how much it hurt that she was gone. Let Charlie see me sad instead of pretending to be okay. Started actually grieving instead of just surviving. And that helped? Eventually. It was terrible first, but real." Thunder cracked directly overhead, loud enough to rattle the windows. Isabel flinched, and Nathan saw the vulnerability she'd been holding at bay finally break through. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "How to just exist without a plan or purpose. Every day I wake up and think I should go back, that hiding here is weak, but then I think about returning to that life and I can't breathe." "So don't go back, not yet." "But what am I doing here, Nathan? I've been in this town for 2 months and the only person I've spoken to is you. That's not living, that's just pausing." The words hit closer to home than she probably meant. Nathan had asked himself similar questions in those first dark months, whether raising Charlie in the shadow of grief was enough, whether their quiet life qualified as actually living. He still didn't have good answers. "Maybe you don't need to know what you're doing yet," he said. "Maybe you just need to do it anyway and figure out the meaning later." Isabel stepped closer, and Nathan felt the air between them charge with something that wasn't quite electricity but felt just as dangerous. She was looking at him like he'd offered something precious, not answers, but permission not to have them. Thank you, she said, for coming out here, for not making me feel stupid. You're not stupid. You're just human. Her hand found his. Tentative, testing. Nathan knew he should pull away, should maintain the professional boundary they'd been pretending still existed. But her palm was warm and her fingers threaded through his like they'd been designed to fit there, and he couldn't remember the last time anyone had touched him like this. Like he mattered as more than Charlie's father or Sarah's widower. The moment stretched, both of them frozen in the space between what they were and what they might become. Then the lights flickered once and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by lightning outside. Generator should kick in, Nathan said, not moving. Give it a minute. But neither of them stepped back. They stood in the dark, hands clasped, breathing the same air, both aware that something had fundamentally shifted. The storm raged outside and inside, in the quiet between two people who'd been pretending not to need each other, something fragile and essential took root. When the lights came back on, Isabel's eyes were wet again. I should go, Nathan said, not meaning it. Stay. She said it quickly, then amended, just until the storm passes, please. So he stayed. They sat in her living room while the storm battered the windows, talking about nothing important. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled, Charlie's latest theory about whether clouds were alive. The conversation meandered like a river finding its path, easy and necessary, and heading somewhere neither of them had planned. Nathan left when the rain finally stopped, around 2 a.m. The drive home felt surreal. The roads washed clean, the world quiet, his hand still warm from where Isabel had held it. He should have felt guilty, should have been worried about crossing lines, about getting involved with someone he barely knew, about exposing Charlie to complications when their life was finally stable. Instead, he just felt awake, more present and real than he'd been in 3 years. Monday morning arrived too bright and clear, the storm having scrubbed the sky clean. Nathan showed up at the Morrison place at 7 sharp to do the final inspection, expecting things to be awkward after the intimacy of the previous night. Instead, Isabel met him at the door with coffee and a smile that made his chest tighten. Sleep well? She asked. Not really. You? Not at all. Her smile widened. Want to help me figure out what's next? And Nathan realized that the job might be done, but whatever was happening between them had only just begun. The question hung between them like morning mist over the lake. Want to help me figure out what's next? And Nathan found himself nodding before his practical mind could list all the reasons this was a terrible idea. What did you have in mind? He asked, following Isabel into the kitchen where she'd already laid out blueprints of the house. The deck was just the beginning. She pointed to various sections of the floor plan. There's dry rot in the bathroom upstairs, the dock needs reinforcing before winter, and I'm thinking about converting the old boathouse into a studio. Nothing urgent, but I'd rather work with someone I trust than start over with a new contractor. Nathan studied the plans, his mind automatically calculating materials and timelines. It was easily another month of work, maybe more if they approached it methodically instead of rushing. A month of legitimate reasons to be here, to exist in Isabel's orbit without having to explain or justify what was growing between them. I'd need to bring Charlie by sometimes, he said carefully. My mother-in-law can't watch him every day, and I won't leave him home alone after school. If that's a problem, it's not a problem. Isabel's response came quick and certain. I'd like to meet him, actually, if that's okay with you. Nathan looked up from the blueprints, surprised by how much the offer meant. In 3 years, he'd kept his professional life and his role as Charlie's father in completely separate spheres. Clients didn't meet his son didn't visit job sites. The boundaries kept everything clean and uncomplicated. But Isabel wasn't watching him with the polite interest of someone making small talk about a contractor's kid. She looked genuinely hopeful, like the prospect of a 7-year-old's chaos entering her carefully controlled space was something to look forward to rather than endure. He's a lot of energy, Nathan warned, and he asks approximately 10,000 questions per hour. Good. This house could use some noise that isn't just me rattling around in it. They shook hands on the deal, a formal gesture that felt absurd after the intimacy of holding hands in the dark during a storm. But it gave them what they both needed, a framework, a reason, permission to keep orbiting each other while they figured out what they were actually doing. Nathan started the bathroom project that afternoon, tearing out the old tile and exposing the water damage underneath. It was worse than expected. The previous owners had ignored a slow leak for years, letting it spread through the subfloor and into the wall studs. The kind of damage that required stripping everything back to bare bones and rebuilding from scratch. "How bad?" Isabel asked, appearing in the doorway with her usual offering of cold water. "Bad enough that we should check the other bathrooms, too. This kind of neglect is rarely isolated." Nathan sat back on his heels, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Might add a week to the timeline." "That's fine. I'm not going anywhere." The statement carried weight beyond bathroom repairs. Nathan caught her eye and saw the truth there. She really wasn't going anywhere, at least not yet. Whatever had brought her to Willow Bay was still holding her here, and part of that equation now included him. Over the next few days, they fell into an easy rhythm. Nathan would arrive early, work through the morning on demolition and assessment. Isabel would bring lunch around noon, and they'd eat together on the finished deck, trading pieces of their lives in increasingly unguarded conversations. She told him about her marriage, how she'd met Richard at a charity gala when she was 28, how he'd seemed steady and ambitious in ways that complemented her drive, how somewhere in the 15 years that followed, they'd stopped being partners and started being opponents in an endless negotiation over whose career mattered more, whose sacrifices counted, whose version of success they were chasing. The divorce was almost a relief, she admitted one afternoon, her legs tucked under her in the Adirondack chair Nathan had refinished. "We'd been living separate lives in the same house for years, but then the business press got hold of it and turned our private failure into a spectator sport. They analyzed our settlement like a corporate merger, interviewed our friends for quotes, published timelines of when we'd last been photographed together looking happy." "That sounds invasive as hell," Nathan said. "It was. But the worst part was realizing I'd spent 15 years building a life with someone, and we couldn't even manage to care enough about each other to fight properly at the end. We just divided assets and moved on, like dissolving a business partnership." Nathan understood that particular brand of grief, not for what you lost, but for what you'd never actually had. He'd felt it sometimes in the months before Sarah died, when he'd noticed the distance growing between them as they navigated the exhausting chaos of raising a toddler. They'd still loved each other, but they'd been so buried in the logistics of survival that they'd stopped being lovers and became just co-managers of their shared life. "Sarah and I were fighting the day she died," he heard himself say. "Stupid argument about whose turn it was to take Charlie to the doctor. I was irritated because she'd forgotten to pick up my dry cleaning, and she was exhausted from a night of teething and sleep regression. We said goodbye that morning, still annoyed at each other." Isabel's hand found his knee, a gesture of comfort that felt natural now. "Nathan, the worst part is I don't even remember what I was so angry about. Just that I was, and that she died thinking I was mad at her. I never got to apologize, never got to tell her that clean shirts didn't matter, that none of the petty bullshit mattered. I'd give anything for one more stupid argument if it meant she was still here." They sat in silence while Nathan composed himself, surprised by his own honesty. He'd never told anyone that story. Not Linda, not his therapist, not the grief support group he'd attended twice before deciding it wasn't for him. But something about Isabel made the words accessible, like she understood that the real grief lived in details too small for others to see. "Do you think she knew?" Isabel asked quietly. "That you loved her despite the fighting?" "I hope so. God, I hope so." Nathan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "But I'll never know for sure, and that's something I have to live with." We all have those things, I think. The conversations we wish we'd had, the moments we can't take back. Isabel's voice was distant, like she was talking to herself as much as to him. "My father and I had a huge fight the week before he died. I wanted to major in art history, and he insisted I study business. He said I could pursue my passions after I learned to manage money, that artistic sensibility without financial literacy was just expensive self-indulgence." "What did you say?" "That he was a controlling tyrant who couldn't accept that I might want something different than what he'd planned." She laughed, but it was edged with old pain. 3 days later he was dead, and suddenly his plans became my obligation. I gave up art school and dove into business, telling myself it was honoring his legacy. But really, I think I was just trying to apologize for calling him a tyrant. And now? Nathan asked. Now I don't know. I built exactly what he wanted. A company 3 times what he left me, a reputation as a ruthless dealmaker, a life where art is something you buy and hang on walls, not something you make. She turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. But I can't shake the feeling that if he could see me now, he'd be disappointed anyway. Not in what I built, but in what I became in the building. Nathan didn't have answers for that kind of pain. He just held her hand and let her cry, understanding that sometimes the best thing you could offer someone was just witnessing their grief without trying to fix it. That evening, when Nathan got home to Charlie, his son was bursting with a question that had apparently been building all day. Dad, when can I see the lake house? Grandma says you're working there every day, and it's not fair that I don't get to see. Nathan hesitated, caught between his instinct to keep his world separate and the memory of Isabel saying she'd like to meet Charlie. Would you want to? It's just a construction site, buddy. Pretty boring. But there's a dock, right? And a lake? That's not boring. Charlie bounced in his seat at the dinner table. Please, I promise I'll be good and not touch your tools and not ask a million questions. You definitely will ask a million questions. Okay, but I'll ask them quietly. Nathan laughed despite himself. Let me talk to Ms. Vaughn and see if Saturday works. But if we go, you have to listen when I tell you to stay back from dangerous areas, okay? I promise. Charlie threw his arms around Nathan's neck in the enthusiastic full-body hug of a child who'd just gotten exactly what he wanted. Later that night, after Charlie was asleep, Nathan texted Isabel. Charlie's asking to see the lake house. Would it be okay if I brought him by Saturday? No pressure. I know having a kid around wasn't part of the deal. Her response came quickly. I'd love to meet him. Come for lunch? I'll make something kid-friendly. Nathan stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the reply. This was a threshold, bringing his son into this still undefined thing with Isabel, letting 2 parts of his life touch that he'd kept carefully separated. If it went badly, if Charlie didn't like her or she found his energy overwhelming, it would complicate everything. But if it went well, that sounds perfect. Fair warning, he's currently convinced the moon is made of frozen alien tears. Can't wait to hear his evidence. Saturday arrived bright and clear, with Charlie practically vibrating with excitement from the moment he woke up. He wanted to wear his favorite space shirt, in case we talk about astronomy, and brought a backpack full of treasures to show the lake house lady, because you said she's nice and nice people like interesting rocks. Remember what we talked about, Nathan said as they pulled into the driveway. Ms. Vaughn values her privacy, so we don't tell everyone at school about coming here, okay? Because she's like a secret superhero who needs a regular identity? Charlie asked, his 7-year-old logic somehow hitting closer to the truth than Nathan expected. Something like that, yeah. Isabel was waiting on the front porch, and Nathan saw her through Charlie's eyes for a moment. A tall, elegant woman who probably seemed very formal and potentially intimidating. But then she smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed her whole face, and came down the steps to meet them. You must be Charlie. I'm Isabel. She crouched down to his level instead of looming over him. Your dad's told me a lot about you. He told me about you too, Charlie announced. He said you live in a really big house all by yourself, and that's kind of sad, but also you have a dock, and I've never been on a dock before except in pictures. Nathan groaned internally, but Isabel just laughed. Well, we definitely need to fix that. Want to see it? She led them around the house to the lakeside, and Charlie's excitement became almost gravitational, pulling him forward with such force that Nathan had to remind him twice to slow down. The newly rebuilt deck gleamed in the sunlight, and beyond it, the dock stretched into the blue water. Can I go on it? Can I? Is it safe? Charlie looked back and forth between Nathan and Isabel with barely contained hope. It's safe, Nathan confirmed. But you stay in the middle, no leaning over the edges, and if I say come back, you come back immediately. Deal? Deal! They walked out onto the dock together, Charlie running ahead and then stopping to examine everything with intense focus. The way the boards were fitted together, the rope wrapped around the mooring posts, the small fish darting in the shallow water below. He fired questions at Nathan with the promised frequency, and Nathan answered patiently, aware that Isabel was watching the two of them with an expression he couldn't quite read. Do fish sleep? How do they breathe underwater? Why doesn't the dock sink? Can we swim here? Do you think there are lake monsters? If there were lake monsters, would they be friendly or mean? I think lake monsters would probably be friendly, Isabel said, joining them at the end of the dock. Monsters only get mean when people are afraid of them. If you're nice, they're nice back. Charlie considered this seriously. That makes sense, like how Dad says dogs can tell when you're scared, and that makes them nervous too. Exactly like that, like. Isabel sat down on the dock, dangling her feet over the water, and after a moment's hesitation, Charlie sat beside her. Nathan hung back, letting them have their moment. He watched his son, usually so shy with new adults, chattering away to Isabel about his theories on aquatic life, and saw her listening with genuine interest instead of the glazed patience most adults showed when children explained their elaborate ideas. She asked follow-up questions, offered her own observations, treated his 7-year-old logic with the same respect she'd probably give a business colleague. Something in Nathan's chest tightened and loosened at the same time. This was dangerous, letting Charlie get attached to someone who might not stay, who had a whole life waiting in whatever city she'd fled from. But watching them together, seeing his son's joy at finding another adult who took his questions seriously, Nathan couldn't bring himself to interrupt. They spent the afternoon in an easy flow. Isabel had indeed made lunch. Grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, which Charlie declared almost as good as Dad's. They ate on the deck, and Charlie told elaborate stories about his classmates and his teacher and the ongoing drama of playground politics. Isabel listened like it mattered, asking clarifying questions about who was friends with whom and whether the swing set dispute had been resolved. After lunch, Nathan showed Charlie some of the repair work, letting him hold the level while they checked one of the new window frames. Charlie took the job with serious concentration, reporting the bubble's position with the gravity of a surgeon calling out vitals. "You're really good at this, Charlie," Isabel observed, patient and careful. "Dad says measuring twice and cutting once is how you don't waste wood. Wood comes from trees, and trees are important for the planet, so we have to be respectful." Charlie repeated Nathan's lessons with the confidence of revealed truth. "Your dad's a smart man." "I know," Charlie said simply. "He's the smartest person I know." "Well, him and my teacher, Ms. Rodriguez. She knows everything about everything." Nathan felt his throat tighten with emotion he couldn't quite name. This was his life. His son's uncomplicated love, the simple satisfaction of work done well, the quiet joy of a Saturday afternoon by the lake. It wasn't glamorous or impressive by Isabel's standards, but it was real, and it was theirs. As the day wore on, Charlie's energy finally began to flag. He ended up on the porch swing with Isabel, both of them reading, her with a novel, him with a picture book about space he'd brought in his backpack. Nathan worked nearby, unable to stop stealing glances at the tableau they made. His son leaning against this woman who'd been a stranger a month ago, both of them comfortable in shared silence. "Dad?" Charlie's sleepy voice drifted over. "Can we come back? Isabel said she has more books about planets." Nathan met Isabel's eyes over his son's head. She looked uncertain, like she'd overstepped but was hoping she hadn't. "We'll see, buddy. Ms. Vaughn might get tired of having visitors." "I really don't think I will," Isabel said softly. They left as the sun started its descent toward the tree line. Charlie half asleep in his booster seat, clutching a rock Isabel had found for his collection. Nathan drove home through the golden light, his mind turning over the implications of what had just happened. Charlie had liked her. More than that, he'd felt safe with her, had opened up in the way he only did with people he trusted. And Isabel had been natural with him, not performing interest or tolerance, but genuinely engaging with his 7-year-old worldview. It should have made things simpler. Instead, it made everything infinitely more complicated. That night, after Charlie was in bed, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Isabel. "Thank you for today. Charlie is wonderful. You're raising an amazing human." He typed back, "Thank you for being so good with him. He doesn't usually warm up to people that fast. Neither do I. Guess we're both making exceptions." Nathan stared at that message for a long time, understanding what she wasn't saying, that whatever was happening between them had just gotten a lot more real. It wasn't just two adults carefully circling each other anymore. Charlie was part of the equation now, which meant the stakes had changed entirely. The following week brought a shift in the weather and in the dynamic between them. Storm systems rolled through regularly, bringing rain that alternated between gentle drizzle and violent downpour. Nathan worked mostly inside, tackling the bathroom renovation while Isabel occupied other rooms of the house. They saw each other constantly but spoke less, both of them processing what Saturday had meant. Nathan caught Isabel watching him sometimes, her expression thoughtful and slightly worried. He imagined his own face looked similar. Wednesday afternoon brought another severe storm, this one arriving with almost no warning. Nathan was on the roof checking the flashing he'd replaced when the sky opened up. Rain hit like a wall of water, turning the roof slick and treacherous in seconds. "Nathan!" Isabel's voice came from below, barely audible over the downpour. "Get down from there!" He was already moving, but the new shingles were slicker than he'd anticipated. His foot slipped on the wet surface, and for one heart-stopping moment, Nathan felt himself sliding toward the edge with nothing to grab onto. He managed to catch the gutter with one hand, the newly reinforced gutter that he'd installed just last week, and arrest his slide. But the momentum wrenched his shoulder viciously, and his other hand scrabbled uselessly on the wet shingles. "Nathan!" Isabel's scream cut through the rain. He got his feet under him, found purchase, made it to the ladder. His shoulder was screaming in pain and his hands were shaking, but he climbed down carefully, aware that rushing now would only make things worse. Isabel was there the moment his feet touched the ground, her hands on his arms, her face white with terror. "Are you hurt? Did you hit your head? Nathan, look at me. I'm okay." His voice came out shakier than he intended. "Just my shoulder. I'm okay." But Isabel was trembling, her fingers digging into his arms hard enough to bruise. "You could have died. You could have fallen and died and—" Her voice broke completely. Nathan pulled her against him with his good arm, both of them soaking wet and shaking for different reasons. Hey, I'm fine. I've got you. We're both fine." She buried her face against his chest and started to cry. Real, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than fear over a near accident. Nathan held her tightly, understanding that this wasn't really about him slipping on a roof. This was about every loss she'd never properly grieved, every moment of holding herself together through sheer force of will, finally cracking open in the safety of someone else's arms. They stood there in the pouring rain until her sobs quieted to hiccups, until Nathan's shoulder stopped screaming quite so loudly, until the storm began to ease into something gentler. "Come inside," Isabel finally said, pulling back and wiping her face. "We need to check your shoulder." The bathroom had a first aid kit. Of course it did. Isabel was the kind of person who prepared for contingencies. She made Nathan sit on the closed toilet while she carefully examined his shoulder, her touch professional, but her hand still shaking slightly. "It's not dislocated," she determined, "but you might have torn something. You should see a doctor." "It's just strained. I have done this before. Ice and ibuprofen. It'll be fine in a few days." "Nathan, Isabel." He caught her hand, stilling her anxious movements. "I'm okay. Really." She sank down on the edge of the bathtub, suddenly looking exhausted. "I watched you slide toward the edge, and I couldn't breathe. All I could think was that I'd just found you and I was about to watch you die, and there was nothing I could do." The confession hung between them, stripping away the last pretense that this was still just a contractor-client relationship that had become a friendship. What Isabel had just described was grief anticipated, the kind of fear you only felt about someone who'd become essential. "I'm sorry I scared you," Nathan said quietly. "Don't apologize, just—" She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Be more careful, please." "I will." They stared at each other in the small bathroom, the air thick with everything they weren't saying. Nathan knew he should leave, should go home and ice his shoulder and put some distance between this moment and whatever came next. But Isabel looked so lost sitting there, and his own heart was still racing from the fall and from the realization that he'd been just as terrified, not of dying, but of leaving her alone. "Stay for dinner," Isabel said suddenly. "Please, I don't want to be alone right now, and you shouldn't drive with your shoulder like that anyway." It was a flimsy excuse. His shoulder was sore but functional, and they both knew it. But Nathan found himself nodding anyway, because the truth was he didn't want to leave either. Didn't want to go home to his empty house and process what had almost happened in solitude. "I need to call Linda. Let her know I'll be late picking up Charlie. Use the phone in the kitchen. I'll start dinner. Linda agreed to keep Charlie for dinner with the kind of knowing tone that suggested she understood more than Nathan was saying. He hung up feeling guilty and relieved in equal measure. Dinner turned into a quiet, domestic scene that felt both surreal and completely natural. Isabel cooked pasta with more skill than Nathan expected. Apparently, one of the few things she'd learned during her marriage was how to make Italian food from scratch. They ate at her kitchen table, drinking wine and talking about nothing important, both of them carefully avoiding the larger conversation looming between them. After dinner, they migrated to the living room where a fire was already laid in the fireplace. Isabel lit it despite the summer evening, and they sat on the couch watching flames dance while rain pattered against the windows. "Can I ask you something?" Isabel said, her voice soft in the firelight. "Always." "What are we doing, Nathan?" There it was, the question they'd both been avoiding. Nathan took a breath, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. "I don't know," he admitted. "I came here to fix your deck. That was supposed to be it. A job, nothing more. But then you started bringing me water and asking real questions and actually listening to the answers, and somewhere in there this stopped being about carpentry." "For me too," Isabel said quietly. "I hired you because I needed someone who wouldn't recognize me, wouldn't have expectations or judgments. But you see me anyway. Not the version the press writes about, or the persona I wear in boardrooms, but actually me. And I can't remember the last time anyone did that. So where does that leave us?" Isabel turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "I need you to understand something. My life, my real life, is chaos. There are legal battles over my company, press that follows my movements, an ex-husband who keeps trying to leverage our divorce for better terms. Coming here was supposed to be temporary, just long enough to clear my head and figure out my next move." "But," Nathan prompted, "but I didn't expect you. Didn't expect to feel more like myself in a month with you than I have in years living the life I built. And now I'm terrified because I don't know how to fit these two things together, who I am here and who I have to be out there." Nathan understood that fear intimately. He'd felt it after Sarah died, the impossibility of reconciling the man he'd been in their marriage with the single father he'd become. You couldn't just merge two identities and expect a clean result. "I can't offer you simple," he said honestly. "I have a 7-year-old son who has to come first, always. I have a small business that barely keeps us afloat some months. I have grief that still shows up unexpected and a life that probably looks boring compared to what you're used to. You think that's what I want? Something exciting?" Isabel's laugh was bitter. "Nathan, I have lived exciting. I've closed deals worth billions, fought corporate battles that made headlines, built an empire from what my father left me, and it's exhausting and hollow, and I can't remember the last time any of it made me actually happy." She reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. "What you're offering, stability, honesty, a life built on real things instead of performance, that's not boring. That's what I've been missing." "But for how long?" Nathan couldn't keep the fear out of his voice. "How long before the novelty wears off and you miss the excitement? Before this quiet life feels like a cage instead of a refuge?" "I don't know," Isabel admitted. "I can't promise you forever when I don't even know what next month looks like. But I can promise you that this, whatever this is, it matters to me. You matter to me." Nathan looked at their joined hands, at the firelight playing across her face, at the vulnerability in her expression. Every practical voice in his head was screaming warnings about getting involved with someone whose life was so fundamentally different from his, someone who might leave when reality reasserted itself. But there was another voice, too, quieter but more insistent, the part of him that had been barely surviving for 3 years and had suddenly, unexpectedly, found someone who made him want to actually live again. "I'm scared," he said simply. "Me too. Charlie can't get hurt. If we do this, whatever this is, and it doesn't work out, I can handle that. But he's already lost his mother. I won't let him lose someone else he cares about." "I would never." Isabel stopped, recognizing the unfairness of promising what she couldn't guarantee. "I care about Charlie too. The last thing I want is to hurt him." "Then we have to be sure. Before this goes any further, before he gets more attached, we have to be sure this is real and not just two lonely people seeking comfort. Isabel was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I have never been less sure of anything in my life, but I've also never felt anything this real. So maybe sure isn't the point. Maybe the point is whether we're brave enough to try despite not being sure. Nathan knew she was right. Love, if that's what this was becoming, never came with guarantees. Sarah hadn't come with guarantees. Nothing in life did. You just had to decide whether the potential was worth the risk. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull back, and kissed her. It was gentle and tentative, a question more than a statement. Isabel's hand came up to cup his face, her answer clear in the way she leaned into him. The kiss deepened, and Nathan felt something in his chest crack open, not breaking, but expanding, making room for feelings he'd thought died with Sarah. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Isabel rested her forehead against his. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, what?" "Okay, let's try. Let's be brave." Nathan kissed her again, and this time it felt like a promise. He left an hour later, his shoulder still aching, but his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. The drive home took him past the lake, dark and still under a clear sky where the storm had finally passed. He thought about Isabel's words, about being brave enough to try despite uncertainty, and realized that's what living actually required. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward with it. When he got home, he found a text from Isabel waiting. "Thank you for staying, for being honest, for kissing me like I was something precious." He typed back, "You are." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "So are you. Sleep well, Nathan." He did, for the first time in longer than he could remember, without the weight of tomorrow's fears pressing on his chest. The morning after their first kiss, Nathan woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the immediate visceral memory of Isabel's lips against his. For a moment he just lay there, letting himself feel the strange mixture of joy and terror that came with opening your heart again after you'd convinced yourself it was permanently closed. Then Charlie burst into the room with his usual 7-year-old disregard for concepts like privacy or sleeping in, and reality reasserted itself with the force of a small human launching himself onto the bed. "Dad! Dad, you're awake! Grandma made pancakes and said I could come get you, and guess what? I had a dream about lake monsters, and they were actually friendly, just like Isabel said." Nathan caught his son mid-bounce, pulling him into a hug that made Charlie squeal with laughter. "Good morning to you too, buddy. Give me 5 minutes to get dressed, okay?" Over breakfast at Linda's house, because apparently his mother-in-law had decided Nathan needed feeding after his late night, Charlie chattered about his dreams while Linda watched Nathan with the knowing expression of a woman who'd raised 2 children and could read guilt and happiness in equal measure on her son-in-law's face. "You look better," she said carefully, refilling his coffee. "Less tired than you've been." "The job's going well," Nathan offered, which was true, but not the whole truth. Linda set down the coffee pot with deliberate precision. "Tom's wife mentioned that the Morrison Place owner is quite beautiful, sophisticated. Not from around here." Nathan kept his expression neutral, aware that Charlie was listening even while building a tower out of pancake pieces. "I wouldn't know. I'm just there to fix things." "Of course." Linda's smile was gentle, but knowing. "I'm just saying, it's okay if it's more than that. Sarah's been gone 3 years, honey. She wouldn't want you to stop living." The words hit Nathan harder than expected. He told himself the same thing countless times, had heard it from his therapist and from well-meaning friends. But hearing it from Linda, Sarah's mother, the woman who had every right to want him to remain faithful to her daughter's memory, made it real in a way nothing else had. "I don't know what it is yet," he said quietly, glancing at Charlie to make sure he was distracted. "But whatever happens, Charlie comes first. Always. I know that. You're a good father, Nathan, but you're also allowed to be a man who has his own life, his own happiness." Linda squeezed his shoulder. "Just be careful. With yourself and with our boy." Nathan returned to work Monday morning with his emotions carefully compartmentalized. The kiss locked away in one chamber, his responsibilities to Charlie in another, the practical work of bathroom renovation in a third. It was a system that had served him well since Sarah's death. Keep everything separate. Don't let feelings bleed between categories. Maintain control through careful boundaries. Isabel destroyed that system within 5 minutes of his arrival. She was waiting on the porch, coffee in hand, wearing jeans and a soft sweater that made her look younger and more vulnerable than her usual composed elegance. The moment their eyes met, something passed between them. Recognition, heat, the memory of what had shifted between them. "Hi," she said, and it came out breathless. "Hi." Nathan climbed the steps slowly, hyper-aware of the space between them. "How's your morning?" "Long. I've been up since 5 thinking about Saturday night." She handed him the coffee, their fingers brushing in a way that felt deliberate. "About what we said. What we did." "Having second thoughts?" "Yes. And third and fourth thoughts. But none of them are about wanting to take it back." Isabel's expression was serious. "I meant what I said about being brave, but I need you to know that I'm terrible at this, at relationships, at letting people in, at being vulnerable without trying to control every variable." Nathan took a sip of coffee, considering his response. "I'm not exactly great at it either. I've spent 3 years building walls around everything that matters. This," he gestured between them, "scares the hell out of me." "Good. At least we're equally terrified." They stood on the porch for another moment, the morning air cool and carrying the scent of pine from the wood surrounding the property. Nathan knew he should go inside and start work, should maintain some semblance of professional boundaries, even if they were already thoroughly blurred. But he couldn't quite make himself move. "Can I take you to dinner?" he asked suddenly. "Actual dinner, in town, like a date, not just takeout while we hide from the world." Isabel's eyes widened slightly. "In Willow Bay? Where everyone will see and talk and draw conclusions?" "Yeah, unless you're not ready for that." "I thought you wanted to keep this quiet, for Charlie's sake." Nathan had thought that too, had planned to suggest they keep whatever this was private until they figured out if it had staying power. But standing here with Isabel, he realized that hiding felt like dishonesty, to himself, to her, to the town that had held him through his worst grief. "I did want that," he admitted, "but I'm tired of pretending that significant things in my life don't exist. We don't have to make announcements or explain ourselves. Just dinner, like two adults who enjoy each other's company." A slow smile spread across Isabel's face, transforming her careful beauty into something radiant. "Okay, yes, I'd like that." "Friday night? There's a restaurant on the water. Nothing fancy, but the food's good and the view's better." "Perfect." They sealed it with a kiss that started chaste and quickly became something more urgent, both of them aware they were standing on her front porch in full view of anyone who might drive past. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan was breathing hard and Isabel's carefully composed hair was decidedly less composed. "I should let you work," she said, her voice husky. "Probably a good idea." But neither of them moved for another long moment, caught in the gravity of what they were choosing. The risk, the exposure, the terrifying possibility that this might actually be real. The week passed in a strange duality. During the day, Nathan worked on the bathroom renovation while Isabel occupied herself with phone calls and video conferences, managing her company remotely in ways he didn't fully understand. They maintained a careful distance during work hours, professional and polite, only the occasional heated glance betraying what simmered beneath the surface. But lunch breaks became extended conversations where they traded pieces of their histories, Isabel's boarding school years and corporate ladder climbing, Nathan's small-town childhood, and marriage to his high school sweetheart. Dinner stretched later each night as Nathan found reasons to stay after his official work hours ended, helping Isabel cook or just sitting at her kitchen island while she worked, and he sketched ideas for the boathouse renovation. Charlie came by twice more that week, each visit natural and easy. Isabel kept a stock of juice boxes now and had cleared space on one of her bookshelves for the collection of interesting rocks Charlie kept bringing her. She learned that he hated mushrooms but loved broccoli, that his favorite color was space blue, regular blue but darker, and that he could spend an hour explaining the plot of his favorite cartoon if given the opportunity. "She's really nice, Dad," Charlie said Wednesday night at bedtime, "and she doesn't treat me like I'm dumb when I ask questions." "You're not dumb, buddy. You're curious. That's different. I know, but lots of adults act like kid questions are annoying. Isabel actually thinks about them before answering. Charlie pulled his blankets up to his chin, his expression serious. Do you think she'll stay in Willow Bay, or is she going to leave like Mrs. Peterson did? Mrs. Peterson had been Charlie's kindergarten teacher, a young woman from Seattle who'd lasted exactly 1 year in Willow Bay before fleeing back to the city. Charlie had loved her, and her departure had been his first real experience with loss that wasn't death. I don't know, buddy, Nathan said honestly. Isabel has a job and a life somewhere else. This might just be temporary for her. But you like her, I can tell. Nathan's throat tightened. His son was more perceptive than he'd given him credit for. I do like her. Is that okay with you? Charlie considered this with the gravity of someone much older. Mom's not coming back, right? That's what you always say, that she died and death is permanent, and we can't change it. That's right. So it's okay if you like other people. I mean, I still love Mom, even though I like my new teacher, Ms. Rodriguez. You can love someone who's gone and still have room for new people. The wisdom from his 7-year-old son nearly broke Nathan. He pulled Charlie into a tight hug, pressing his face against his son's hair to hide the tears. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice because I'm short. Nathan laughed through his tears. Fair point. Now go to sleep, brilliant small person. Dad? If Isabel does stay, and if you keep liking her, would that be okay? Because I think I'd like that. Yeah, buddy. I think I'd like that too. Guys, what's up? Friday arrived with the nervous energy that made Nathan feel 17 again, anxious about a first date in ways he hadn't experienced in 2 decades. He picked Isabel up at 7, and she emerged from the lake house wearing a simple black dress that somehow managed to be elegant and understated at the same time. You look beautiful, he said, and meant it. You clean up pretty well yourself. She touched his collar, straightening it unnecessarily. Ready to scandalize the town? Let them talk. We're just having dinner. The Lakeview restaurant sat on the far end of the bay, a converted boathouse with windows that overlooked the water. It was the nicest place in Willow Bay, which meant cloth napkins and candles, but still casual enough that Nathan didn't feel completely out of place in his button-down shirt and jeans. They were seated at a table by the window just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The waitress, Jenny, who'd graduated 2 years ahead of Nathan in high school, did an admirable job of hiding her surprise at seeing him with a woman who was very clearly not from around here. Nathan, it's been forever. How's Charlie doing? Growing like a weed, starting 2nd grade next month already. They do that. Jenny's eyes slid to Isabel with barely contained curiosity. And who's your friend? Isabel Vaughn. She bought the Morrison place. Oh, we'd heard someone was fixing it up. Welcome to Willow Bay. Jenny's smile was genuine, but Nathan could already see her mind working, calculating how fast she could spread this news. Can I start you folks with drinks? They ordered wine and were left alone to study menus they didn't really need. Nathan felt Isabel's tension across the table, the way she held herself carefully, aware of being observed. You okay? He asked quietly. People are staring. They're just curious. Small towns are like that. Everyone knows everyone, and new people are interesting. They're not staring at me because I'm new. They're staring because I'm here with you. Isabel's fingers worried the stem of her water glass. I can see them wondering what Nathan Cole is doing with a woman like me. A woman like you? Rich. From somewhere else. Too old for you, probably too complicated. Stop. Nathan reached across the table, stilling her anxious hands with his own. You know what they're actually thinking? That I'm lucky. That somehow I managed to get a date with the most beautiful woman who's set foot in this town in years. That maybe Nathan Cole is doing okay after all. Isabel's eyes filled with tears that she blinked back quickly. You don't know that. I know this town. I know these people. And yes, they'll talk. That's unavoidable. But they won't be cruel. They'll just be interested, and eventually that interest will fade into acceptance, and then we'll just be Nathan and Isabel who sometimes have dinner at the Lakeview. He squeezed her hands gently. Unless you want to leave. We can get takeout and eat at my place or yours. No. Isabel straightened her shoulders, and Nathan saw the steel that had let her build an empire. No, I'm done hiding. Let them look. Dinner was easier after that. They ordered the local trout and talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled, the peculiar physics of Charlie's Lego constructions. The wine helped, as did the sunset painting the lake in shades of orange and pink. By the time dessert arrived, Isabel was laughing at Nathan's story about a bathroom renovation that had accidentally uncovered a family of raccoons, and he was watching her with an expression he didn't bother to hide. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Just thinking how much I like seeing you like this. Relaxed, happy. I like feeling like this." She took a bite of chocolate cake, her eyes never leaving his. I'd forgotten what it was like to just exist with someone without performing or strategizing. "You make me feel normal." "You are normal. Just normal with a few more zeros in your bank account than most." "It's more than money, though. It's expectations, obligations, the constant weight of maintaining an image. Sometimes I think Isabel Vaughn, the CEO, is more real than the person underneath. Like I've been performing so long, I've forgotten what's authentic." Nathan understood that feeling, the way grief had made him perform being okay for Charlie's sake until he sometimes couldn't remember what actually okay felt like. "So who are you when you're not performing?" Isabel was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "I think I'm someone who likes getting her hands dirty in the garden. Who reads poetry even though it's not productive or useful. Who wants to paint again someday, maybe, if she can remember how to create without critiquing. Who's lonely enough to buy a house in a town where she knows no one, just to see if solitude feels different than isolation. And does it?" "Not anymore." Her voice was soft. "Not since I met you." The declaration hung between them, weighted with meaning. Nathan felt his heart rate accelerate, that familiar cocktail of fear and hope flooding his system. This was the moment, the point where he could pull back, make a joke, keep things light and undefined. Or he could be brave. "I'm falling for you," he said, the words coming out steadier than he felt. "I know it's fast and probably crazy and definitely complicated, but I need you to know that this isn't casual for me. You're not casual for me." Isabel's hand found his across the table, gripping tight. "I'm falling for you too, and it terrifies me because I don't know how to make this work. My life, your life, all the impossible logistics, but I can't seem to stop myself." They paid the check and walked down to the dock, holding hands in full view of anyone who cared to look. The evening had cooled into something perfect, the kind of summer night that reminded Nathan why he'd never been able to leave this place despite all its limitations. "I have to tell you something," Isabel said, stopping at the end of the dock. "And you're not going to like it." Nathan's stomach dropped. "Okay." "My lawyers called today. The board is pressuring me to return for an emergency meeting next week. There's a hostile takeover attempt brewing, and they need me there to shore up support among the shareholders." "How long would you be gone?" "I don't know. A few days at minimum, maybe longer depending on how it plays out." She turned to face him, her expression anguished. "I don't want to go. But if I don't, I could lose the company my father built. Everything I've spent my adult life protecting." Nathan processed this, fighting the immediate fear that she'd leave and never come back, that the pull of her real life would prove stronger than whatever they were building here. "When do you have to decide?" "I already decided. I'm going." Isabel's voice broke slightly. "But I'm coming back. I swear to you, Nathan, I'm coming back." "You can't promise that. What if the situation requires you to stay? What if your company needs you there permanently?" "Then I'll handle it remotely, or I'll promote someone else to handle daily operations, or I'll sell the whole damn thing, but I'm not disappearing from your life." She cupped his face in her hands, her eyes fierce. "I have spent years letting that company define me, letting other people's expectations dictate every choice. I'm done with that. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you." Nathan wanted to believe her, wanted it so badly his chest ached with it, but he'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true, that promises made in emotional moments often crumbled under the weight of reality. "I need you to be sure," he said quietly, "because Charlie's already attached to you. If you leave and don't come back, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt him too, and I can't—" His voice cracked. "I can't watch my son lose someone else he cares about." "I know," And I'm terrified of hurting either of you, of making promises I can't keep. But Nathan, I have never been more sure of anything than I am of wanting to be here. With you. With Charlie. Building something real instead of just successful. She kissed him then, desperate and fierce, and Nathan kissed her back with all the fear and hope tangled in his chest. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Come back," he whispered. "Please come back. I will. I promise." They spent Saturday together, all three of them. Isabel insisted on it, saying she wanted to fill her memory with good things before she had to face the corporate sharks next week. They took Charlie to the state park for a hike, packed a picnic, spent the afternoon exploring trails and skipping stones across the creek. Charlie was in heaven, running ahead and doubling back to share his discoveries. Interesting bugs, unusual rocks, a tree that had fallen in a way that made it perfect for climbing. Isabel followed his enthusiastic narration with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed children, asking questions and offering observations that made Charlie light up even more. "You're good with him," Nathan said during a moment when Charlie had run ahead to investigate what he was certain was a fairy house, actually just an interesting rock formation. "He's easy to be good with. He's curious and kind and sees wonder in everything." Isabel watched Charlie with a soft expression. "Is this what it's like all the time? Parenting, I mean." "More or less, though usually with more homework battles and bedtime negotiations." Nathan hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Did you and Richard ever think about having kids?" "We talked about it early on. I wanted to wait until the company was more stable, and he agreed it made sense to establish our careers first. Then the waiting became the status quo, and before we knew it, we were both 40 and didn't actually like each other enough to raise a child together." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you think it's too late? For me, I mean. Am I too old to start over with that part of life?" The question felt weighted with more than casual curiosity. Nathan chose his words carefully. "I think people have kids at all ages for all kinds of reasons. But I won't lie. It's hard. The best and hardest thing I've ever done. And doing it alone is harder still. You wouldn't be alone if we—" Isabel stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "Sorry, that's presumptuous. We've been dating for a week and I'm already planning hypothetical futures." "I like that you're thinking about futures. Even hypothetical ones." Nathan pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her waist. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be an amazing mother. Patient, thoughtful, willing to take a 7-year-old's theories about alien tears seriously." "That theory has merit," Isabel insisted, making him laugh. They collected Charlie and headed back to Nathan's house for dinner, a small 2-bedroom place on the edge of town that suddenly felt too cramped and shabby with Isabel in it. But she didn't seem to notice, just helped Charlie set the table while Nathan grilled burgers and pretended his hands weren't shaking slightly at the domesticity of it all. After dinner, Charlie challenged Isabel to a Lego building competition, and Nathan watched from the couch as they constructed increasingly elaborate spaceships with the serious concentration of engineers. Isabel's design was elegant and structurally sound. Charlie's was chaos held together by imagination and willpower. They declared it a tie. "I should go," Isabel said reluctantly when Charlie started yawning. "Let you guys do your bedtime routine." "Stay," Nathan said, surprising himself. "Just for bedtime story, if you want." She wanted. They all ended up in Charlie's small bedroom, Charlie in his bed and Nathan and Isabel sitting on the floor beside him while Nathan read from the current chapter book. Charlie's eyes grew heavy, and he reached out to hold Isabel's hand in that unconscious way children had of claiming the people they trusted. When Charlie finally drifted off, they extracted themselves carefully and returned to the living room. Isabel looked shaken, her eyes bright with unshed tears. That was... She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "I know. He held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, like I belonged there." "You did belong there." Nathan pulled her into his arms, feeling her trembling slightly. "Is this too much? Too fast?" "Yes, but I don't want it to stop." She looked up at him, vulnerability written across every feature. "I leave Tuesday morning. I'll be gone at least 4 days, maybe a week, and I'm terrified that while I'm gone, you'll realize this was all just a summer fantasy, That reality will reassert itself and you'll decide I'm too complicated, too damaged, too much risk. Isabel, let me finish, please. She took a shaky breath. I need you to know that I'm not playing at this. I'm not some bored rich woman looking for a distraction in a small town. What I feel for you, for both of you, is real. And if you give me time to handle this crisis, I will come back. I will figure out how to make this work. I just need you to wait for me. Nathan cupped her face in his hands, making her look at him. I'm not going anywhere. Handle your business, save your company, do what you need to do. But come back to us. That's all I ask. I will. I swear. He kissed her with all the fear and hope rioting in his chest, trying to memorize the taste of her, the way she fit against him. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. Stay tonight, Nathan whispered. We don't have to. I just don't want you to leave yet. Okay. They ended up on his couch, Isabel curled against his side, both of them knowing they should sleep, but unwilling to waste these last hours together. They talked in whispers about everything and nothing, her fears about the board meeting, his worries about a new client, Charlie's upcoming birthday, her father's love of classical music. Somewhere around 2 a.m, Isabel's phone buzzed with an alert. She checked it, and Nathan felt her entire body tense. What is it? News alert. Someone leaked a photo of us at dinner last night to one of the business gossip sites. She turned the phone so he could see. A grainy but unmistakable image of them at the lakeview, holding hands across the table, both of them looking at each other like nothing else existed. The headline read, Disgraced CEO Isabel Vaughn spotted with mystery man in small town hideaway. Nathan felt his stomach drop. Disgraced? That's what they called me after the divorce and the board fight. Disgraced, ruthless ice queen. Pick your favorite pejorative. Isabel's voice was bitter. I should have known someone would recognize me eventually. Small town or not, there's always someone with a camera and a Twitter account. What does this mean? She scrolled through the article, her expression growing darker. It means my privacy is over. It means reporters will start showing up here, digging into your life, Charlie's life, asking invasive questions and printing whatever answers get them clicks. She looked up at him, guilt written across her face. Nathan, I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid by being discreet, and now I've dragged you into the spotlight anyway. Nathan's mind was racing, already calculating the implications. Charlie would be questioned at school. Linda would see the article, worry, possibly think Nathan was making reckless choices. His clients might get nervous about being associated with whatever scandal the press decided to manufacture. But looking at Isabel's stricken expression, he realized the scrutiny would be infinitely worse for her. Every detail of her life dissected, every choice questioned, their relationship reduced to speculation and judgment from strangers who knew nothing about what they actually meant to each other. We'll handle it, he said firmly. Nathan, you don't understand what this is like. They'll tear you apart looking for the story. They'll call you a gold digger or a small town nobody trying to latch onto my money. Or worse, they'll drag your wife's death into it, question whether you're a fit parent, speculate about whether this is appropriate for Charlie. Stop. Nathan pulled the phone from her hands and set it aside. I don't care what they say about me. Let them write whatever fiction they want. I know the truth, and that's what matters. But Charlie will be fine, because we'll be honest with him. Age appropriate, but honest. We'll prepare him, protect him as much as we can, and teach him that other people's opinions don't define our worth. Nathan tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. You think I haven't dealt with gossip before? In a town this size, everyone knew within hours when Sarah died, knew exactly how it happened, had opinions about whether I was coping well enough. I survived that. I'll survive this. This is different. That was sympathy. This is scrutiny. Maybe, but I'm not 18 anymore, and I'm not going to let fear of what people might say keep me from something real. He kissed her forehead gently. Go to your meeting. Face your board. I'll deal with whatever happens here, and when you come back, we'll figure out the rest together. Isabel buried her face against his chest, her fingers clutching his shirt. I don't deserve you. That's not your decision to make. Now stop arguing with me and get some sleep. You have a company to save. She did sleep eventually, curled against him on the couch, her breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of exhaustion. Nathan stayed awake, one arm around her, and his mind churning through everything that was about to change. The photo had been taken by someone local. He'd recognized Jenny in the background, which meant it was either a tourist passing through or someone from town who'd seen an opportunity. Either way, the damage was done. By morning, everyone in Willow Bay would know that Nathan Cole was dating Isabel Vaughn, billionaire CEO, in hiding. The attention would be immediate and intense. He thought about Charlie, about how to explain this in a way that wouldn't scare him, about Linda, who deserved to hear it from Nathan before she read it online, about his handful of clients who might wonder if he'd still be available now that he was apparently involved with someone famous enough to make headlines. But mostly, he thought about the woman sleeping in his arms, and the choice she was making to come back to him despite knowing how much easier it would be to just disappear back into her corporate world and chalk this up to a summer distraction. She'd said she was choosing him. Now he had to trust that she meant it. Sunday morning brought the inevitable confrontation. Linda called at 7:30, her voice tight with concern. "Nathan, I just saw the most bizarre article online. Please tell me it's not actually you in that photo." He'd extracted himself from Isabel carefully, leaving her sleeping on the couch while he took the call in the kitchen. "It's me. And before you say anything, I was going to tell you. I just didn't expect it to go public this fast." "You're dating Isabel Vaughn, the woman from the Morrison place? Nathan, do you have any idea who she is?" "I know exactly who she is, Linda. I also know that the person she is doesn't match what the press writes about her." There was a long silence. When Linda spoke again, her voice was softer. "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "What? Are you happy with her? Does she treat you well? Is this good for you and Charlie?" Nathan thought about the question seriously. "Yeah, I am. She's kind and honest, and she's amazing with Charlie. And I know it's complicated and probably looks crazy from the outside, but this is real." "Then that's all that matters," Linda sighed. "But, honey, you need to prepare for what's coming. This kind of attention, it's not kind, and it won't care about protecting Charlie. You need to have a plan." "I know, we're working on it." After he hung up, Nathan found Isabel awake on the couch, scrolling through her phone with an expression of grim resignation. It's everywhere. Business news, society pages, even a few of the tabloids picked it up. They found your social media, pulled photos of you and Charlie. Don't worry, nothing inappropriate, just public stuff from your accounts. But they're already writing narratives about the grieving widower and the ruthless CEO. "Let them write. We know what's true." "Do we?" Isabel looked up at him, her eyes red. "Nathan, what if they're right? What if I'm just using you as an escape, and 6 months from now, when the novelty wears off, I hurt you and Charlie and prove every terrible thing they're saying?" Nathan sat beside her, taking the phone away and setting it aside. "Or what if 6 months from now we're still figuring this out, still building something real, and all those people who were so certain it would fail have moved on to judging someone else? Isabel, you don't get to decide ahead of time that you're going to fail. That's just fear talking. Fear based on a pretty solid track record of failed relationships and poor life choices. Or based on being in the wrong relationships with the wrong people for the wrong reasons." He took her hands, making her look at him. "I can't promise this will work, but I can promise that I'm all in. So the question isn't whether you might hurt us eventually. The question is whether you're willing to try despite being scared." Isabel was quiet for a long moment, her expression shifting through several emotions Nathan couldn't quite read. Finally, she squeezed his hands and nodded. "Okay, I'm willing to try, but we need to talk to Charlie before I leave. He deserves to hear about this from us, not from kids at school who heard their parents gossiping." They woke Charlie gently, made him his favorite breakfast, and sat him down at the kitchen table with the seriousness that preceded important conversations. "Buddy, we need to talk to you about something," Nathan started. "You know how Isabel and I have been spending a lot of time together?" "Because you're dating," Charlie said matter-of-factly, making both adults blink in surprise. "What? I'm 7, not stupid. You hold hands and smile all goofy when you look at each other." "Right. Well, some people found out about us dating and they wrote articles about it on the internet, which means other people might ask you questions about Isabel or about our family." Charlie's expression grew serious. "What kind of questions?" Probably things like how long we've been dating, or what Isabel's like, or whether I'm happy. And we want you to know that you don't have to answer anything you don't want to. If someone makes you uncomfortable, you can tell them it's private and come tell me or Grandma. Are people going to be mean? Charlie asked, his voice small. Isabel spoke up, her voice gentle. Some might be. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because grown-ups sometimes say unkind things when they don't understand a situation. But Charlie, I need you to know something important. Your dad and I care about each other very much, and that's real, no matter what anyone says. Are you leaving? Is that why we're having this talk? The perceptiveness of the question made Nathan's chest tight. Isabel has to go back to her job for a few days to handle some important business, but she's coming back. Promise? Charlie looked at Isabel with those two old eyes that had seen loss before. I promise, she said, and Nathan could hear that she meant it with everything she had. I promise I'm coming back to you and your dad. This is where I want to be. Charlie studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but if you break your promise, I'm going to be really mad. That's fair, Isabel said seriously. I would be really mad too. They spent the rest of the day together, a strange combination of normal Sunday activities and underlying tension about what came next. Charlie seemed mostly unbothered by the revelation, more interested in building Lego spaceships than worrying about internet articles. But Nathan caught Isabel watching them both with an expression that looked like memorization, storing up these moments against the uncertainty ahead. That night, after Charlie was in bed, Nathan drove Isabel back to the Morrison place. They sat in his truck in her driveway, neither quite ready to say goodbye. 4 days, she said. Maybe 5 at most. I'll handle the board meeting, shore up support among the shareholders, and delegate everything I possibly can. Then I'm coming back. And if you can't delegate? If they need you there? Then I'll figure something else out. Maybe keep the CEO title, but relocate my base of operations here. Or promote my COO and stay on as chairman. Or sell my shares and wash my hands of the whole thing. She turned to face him fully. Nathan, I mean it when I say I'm choosing this. You and Charlie, and the possibility of a real life. That matters more than a company I built to prove something to a dead man. Don't make rash decisions. That company is your legacy. No, she said firmly. That company is my father's legacy that I've been carrying. My legacy gets to be something I choose, something real and mine, and worth more than a stock price. Nathan kissed her, trying to pour all his hope and fear into the contact. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying again. Come back to me, he whispered. I will, I swear I will. He walked her to the door, kissed her one more time, and forced himself to get back in the truck and drive away. In his rearview mirror, he saw her standing in the doorway, watching him leave, and had to fight the certainty that this was the last time he'd see her. The next morning, Nathan drove Isabel to the small regional airport an hour away, where her private plane waited. They didn't talk much during the drive, just held hands and existed in the bittersweet space of goodbye. At the terminal, she turned to him one last time. Thank you for everything, for seeing me, for being patient, for letting me be part of your and Charlie's life. Thank you for choosing us. She kissed him, soft and lingering, then pulled away and walked toward the plane without looking back. Nathan stood there until the aircraft took off, watching it disappear into the clouds and taking a piece of his heart with it. He drove home through the morning traffic, his mind already spinning with worst-case scenarios. What if the board convinced her to stay? What if her ex-husband used the publicity to make things difficult? What if she realized that Willow Bay and Nathan and Charlie were just a pleasant diversion, but not worth upending her entire life for? His phone buzzed with a text. Wheels up. Missing you already. Tell Charlie I'll call tonight to say goodnight. Nathan smiled despite his fears and typed back, We'll be waiting. Be safe. The response came quickly. Stop pretending this isn't real. It is. I am. We are. I'm coming back. And for the first time since she told him she had to leave, Nathan let himself believe it. The house felt emptier than it should have when Nathan got home. Charlie was at Linda's for the day, which meant Nathan had nothing but silence and his own spiraling thoughts for company. He tried to work, there were invoices to send, materials to order for upcoming jobs, but his concentration kept fracturing, drawn back to the image of Isabel's plane disappearing into the clouds. His phone rang at noon. Unknown number, New York area code. Mr. Cole, this is Miranda Chen from Business Weekly. I'm doing a story on Isabel Vaughn's recent retreat from the public eye, and I understand you two have been spending time together. Would you be willing to answer a few questions? Nathan's jaw tightened. No comment. I'm not trying to be invasive. I just think it's a compelling human interest angle, successful CEO finding connection in a small town. Your perspective would... I said no comment. He hung up before she could continue. 3 more calls came in the next hour, each from a different publication, each asking variations of the same questions. By the 4th call, Nathan had stopped answering numbers he didn't recognize. He should have expected this. Isabel had warned him, but the reality of strangers prying into his life felt more violating than he'd anticipated. That evening, when he picked up Charlie from Linda's, his mother-in-law pulled him aside with a concerned expression. There was a woman here earlier, said she was a reporter, asking questions about you and Isabel. I told her to leave or I'd call the police. Linda's voice was tight with protective anger. Nathan, how bad is this going to get? I don't know. Isabel thinks it'll die down once she handles her board meeting and the news cycle moves on. A week, maybe 2. And if it doesn't? Nathan didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he gathered Charlie and drove home, checking his rearview mirror more than usual to make sure they weren't being followed. The paranoia felt absurd and necessary in equal measure. Charlie was quiet during dinner, pushing pasta around his plate without his usual enthusiasm. Finally, he looked up at Nathan with worried eyes. Dad? Is Isabel going to be okay? What do you mean, buddy? Tommy's mom was talking to Mrs. Peterson at school pickup. She said Isabel's in trouble with her company, and that's why she came here. Is that true? Nathan set down his fork, choosing his words carefully. Isabel had some disagreements with the people she works with. That's why she needed a break, why she bought the lake house. But she's not in trouble. She's just figuring some things out. Tommy's mom said you should be careful, that rich people from the city always leave. Charlie's voice was small. Is Isabel going to leave like Mrs. Peterson did? The question hit Nathan in the chest. He moved to crouch beside Charlie's chair, taking his son's small hands in his. I can't promise you that nothing will ever change because life doesn't work that way. But I can promise you that Isabel cares about us, and when she says she's coming back, she means it. But what if her work makes her stay there? Then we'll figure it out. But Charlie, I need you to trust that the grown-ups in your life are doing their best to make good choices. Can you do that? Charlie nodded, but his eyes were still worried. I really like her, Dad. I don't want her to leave. I know, buddy. I really like her too. That night, true to her word, Isabel called at Charlie's bedtime. Nathan put her on speakerphone while Charlie was brushing his teeth, and the sound of her voice, tired but warm, filled the bathroom. How was your day, Space Explorer? She asked. Charlie's face lit up. We learned about the solar system in summer camp. Did you know that Jupiter has a storm that's been going for hundreds of years? It's called the Great Red Spot, and it's bigger than Earth. I did know that, but I love hearing you explain it. What else did you learn? They talked for 10 minutes about planets and storms and whether astronauts ever got homesick in space. Nathan listened to his son's animated chatter and Isabel's patient responses, feeling his chest tighten with a mixture of love and fear. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of, Charlie getting attached, building Isabel into his small world, making her absence feel like another loss. After Charlie reluctantly said goodnight and headed to bed, Nathan took the phone off speaker and stepped into the hallway. How are you really? He asked quietly. Isabel's sigh came through clearly. Exhausted. The board meeting is tomorrow morning, and I've spent all day in strategy sessions with my lawyers and my COO. The hostile takeover attempt is more serious than I thought. One of our major shareholders is being courted by a private equity firm that wants to break up the company and sell off the profitable divisions. Can you stop them? Maybe. I have enough allies on the board to block the initial vote, but it's going to be close. And Nathan, she paused, and he could hear the strain in her voice. My ex-husband is involved. He's been talking to the PE firm, feeding them inside information about our vulnerabilities. He's doing this to hurt me. Jesus, Isabel. I know. I should have seen it coming. Richard never could handle losing gracefully, but I thought even he wouldn't stoop to sabotaging the company out of spite. She laughed bitterly. Apparently I was wrong. Nathan wanted to be there, wanted to hold her and tell her it would be okay, but all he could offer was his voice across the distance. What do you need from me? Just this, talking to you and Charlie, remembering that there's something real waiting when this is over. That's what I need. We're not going anywhere. Handle your business and come home. Home, she repeated softly. I like the sound of that. After they hung up, Nathan stood in the hallway for a long moment, letting that word settle in his chest. Home. Isabel had called Willow Bay home, had called the life they were building home, and the significance of that wasn't lost on him. She had a penthouse in Manhattan, a company worth billions, a life of luxury and power. But she was choosing a small town, a widowed carpenter, and his 7-year-old son, choosing the possibility of something real over the certainty of something impressive. The weight of that choice, and the responsibility it placed on Nathan to be worth it, felt enormous. The next 3 days passed in a strange suspension. Nathan worked on the Morrison place, making progress on the bathroom renovation and starting preliminary plans for the boathouse conversion. But the property felt haunted by Isabel's absence, every room echoing with conversations they'd had, moments they'd shared. The media attention intensified rather than fading. A photographer showed up at Charlie's school, trying to get pictures until the principal threatened to call the police. Jenny, from the Lakeview restaurant, was apparently offered money for an interview about their dinner date. Tom at the hardware store fielded questions from reporters pretending to be customers, wanting to know about Nathan's character and his relationship with Isabel. Through it all, Willow Bay closed ranks in a way that reminded Nathan why he'd never been able to leave this place. Jenny refused the interview money and told the reporter to leave town. Tom gave vague answers that protected Nathan's privacy while selling the reporters overpriced duct tape. The school implemented a strict no-visitor policy during pickup and drop-off times. Even Mrs. Patterson, who'd always been the town's biggest gossip, told a journalist that Nathan Cole was a good father and a good man, and anyone suggesting otherwise could take it up with her personally. Linda showed up at Nathan's house Wednesday evening with a casserole and a determined expression. I've been thinking about what you said about Isabel, about this being real. Yeah? Nathan accepted the casserole, gesturing for her to come in. I was worried at first, worried that you were getting involved with someone too different, too complicated, that you'd get hurt, or worse, that Charlie would get hurt. She sat at his kitchen table, the same table where Sarah had sat thousands of times. But I've been watching how you've handled this media circus, how you've protected Charlie and stood by Isabel, even when it would be easier to back away. And I realized something. What's that? You're not the same man you were when Sarah died, that Nathan was drowning in grief just trying to survive each day. But this Nathan, the one sitting in front of me now, he's living again. He's taking risks, opening his heart, choosing hope over fear. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Sarah would be so proud of the man you've become. And she'd like Isabel, I think. She always said you needed someone strong enough to challenge you. Nathan felt his throat close with emotion. I miss her. Even with everything that's happening with Isabel, I still miss Sarah. Of course you do. Love doesn't work like that. It doesn't replace. It expands. You can miss Sarah and love Isabel. You can honor what you had and reach for what you might have. They're not mutually exclusive. Linda reached across the table to squeeze his hand. Just promise me you'll be careful. Not because I don't trust Isabel, but because the world she comes from is different from ours. Make sure you're protecting yourself and Charlie. I promise. Thursday afternoon brought the news Nathan had been both hoping for and dreading. Isabel called while he was installing new tile in the bathroom, her voice shaking with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. We won. The board voted to reject the takeover offer and filed a restraining order against the PE firm for corporate espionage. Richard's involvement is under investigation, and my lawyers think he might face criminal charges. She laughed, but it sounded brittle. I should be celebrating. This is what I wanted, but all I feel is tired. When can you come home? Nathan asked, the words slipping out naturally now. That's the complicated part. Isabel's voice dropped. The board wants me to stay through the end of the month to stabilize things, do a press tour, reassure investors. My COO is pushing for me to take a more active role again, to prove I'm committed to the company long term. Nathan's stomach dropped. And what do you want? I want to get on a plane right now and come back to you and Charlie. I want to finish fixing up the lake house and learn how to maintain a deck properly and have dinner at the Lakeview without caring who takes pictures. Her voice broke. But I also know I can't just abandon the company my father built. Can't let all those employees lose their jobs because I'm too selfish to see this through. Isabel, taking care of yourself isn't selfish, isn't it? I have responsibilities, Nathan. People depending on me. And I ran away from all of that because it was hard and I was tired. But the problems didn't disappear just because I did. Nathan sat down on the bathroom floor, his mind racing through the implications of what she was saying. How long do they want you to stay? Through September at least. Maybe longer if the situation with Richard gets messier. She was crying now. He could hear it in her voice. I'm so sorry. I know I promised I'd come back, and I meant it. I still mean it. But the world isn't that simple, Nathan finished for her. I get it. You can't just walk away from your entire life because we've known each other for 2 months. That's not what I'm saying. This isn't about you not being enough, Nathan. You're everything. You and Charlie are the most real thing that's happened to me in years. But I can't pretend that my responsibilities don't exist just because I want them to. Nathan closed his eyes, trying to think through the crushing disappointment to what actually made sense. So what are you saying? That you're choosing the company over us? No. I'm saying I need time to do this right, to transition some of my responsibilities, to put systems in place so I can actually step back without everything collapsing. I'm saying I need you to trust me, to wait for me, even though I know that's asking a lot. How much time, Isabel? Because I have a 7-year-old son who's already asking when you're coming back, who's already built you into his idea of what our family looks like. I can't keep telling him soon, if soon keeps turning into eventually, or maybe never. I know, and I hate that I'm doing this to him, to both of you. She took a shaky breath. 2 months. Give me 2 months to wrap things up here properly. I'll come back for long weekends when I can, we'll video call every day, and then at the end of September I'm done. I'll either delegate enough that I can work remotely, or I'll step down completely. But I will come back to you, please, Nathan. Please believe me. Nathan wanted to. God, he wanted to believe that this was just a temporary setback, that 2 months would pass and she'd return, and they'd build the life they'd been imagining. But he'd learned the hard way that good intentions didn't always survive reality, that promises made in the heat of emotion often crumbled under the weight of practical obligations. I need to think about this, he said quietly, and I need to talk to Charlie. He deserves to be part of this decision. Of course. Take whatever time you need. Isabel's voice was thick with tears. I love you, Nathan. I should have said it before, but I was scared. But I love you, and I love Charlie, and I am coming back. I just need time to do it right. The declaration should have made everything better. Instead, it made everything infinitely more complicated. Nathan had been carefully avoiding that word, not wanting to jinx what they had by naming it too soon. But Isabel had said it first, had put her heart out there, and now he had to decide whether to believe her. I'll call you tomorrow, he managed, after I talk to Charlie. They hung up, and Nathan sat on the bathroom floor surrounded by half-installed tile and tools, his mind churning. 2 months. 8 weeks of uncertainty, of long-distance relationship logistics, of explaining to his son why the woman he cared about couldn't come home yet. 8 weeks of media attention and gossip and well-meaning neighbors asking if he was sure this was a good idea. But also 8 weeks for Isabel to prove she meant what she said, to demonstrate through her actions that she was serious about building a life here. 8 weeks for Nathan to figure out if he was strong enough to handle a relationship with someone whose world operated on a completely different scale than his. That night, after dinner, Nathan sat down with Charlie in the living room. His son was building yet another Lego spaceship, this one apparently designed to reach Neptune because that's where he thought space whales might live. Buddy, I need to talk to you about Isabel. Charlie's hand stilled on the Lego pieces. Is she not coming back? She is coming back, but it's going to take longer than we thought, probably about 2 months. She has to fix some problems with her company first. 2 months is forever, Charlie said, his voice small. I know it feels that way, but she promised she'd call us every day, and she might be able to visit some weekends. And then in September, she'll come home for good. Charlie was quiet for a long moment, his small face serious. Dad? Do you believe her? The question cut right to the heart of Nathan's own uncertainty. He could lie, could tell Charlie that of course he believed Isabel, that adults always keep their promises, but he'd promised his son honesty even when honesty was hard. I want to believe her, and I think she means what she says. But the truth is, buddy, sometimes grown-ups make promises they can't keep, not because they're lying, but because life gets complicated and things change. Like how Mom promised she'd take me to the zoo, but then she died? Nathan's breath caught. Sarah had been planning that zoo trip for weeks. It was supposed to be a special mother-son day while Nathan worked on a big project. She'd died 3 days before the scheduled date. Charlie had been too young to fully understand, but apparently he'd held on to that broken promise all this time. Yeah, kind of like that. Mom didn't break her promise on purpose. She would have taken you to the zoo if she could have. Sometimes circumstances take the choice away from us. Is that what's happening with Isabel? Are circumstances taking the choice away? The wisdom in the question nearly broke Nathan. I don't know yet, but I think she's trying really hard to make sure they don't. And we have to decide if we're willing to wait and see, or if that's too scary. Charlie picked up his Lego spaceship, examining it from all angles. In space, everything takes a long time. Like, it takes years to get to the far planets. But the astronauts go anyway because getting there matters more than how long it takes. That's true. So maybe 2 months is like traveling to Neptune. It's far, but if Isabel is worth it, then we should wait. He looked up at Nathan with those heartbreakingly mature eyes. Is she worth it, Dad? Nathan thought about Isabel, the way she listened to Charlie's elaborate theories with genuine interest, the way she'd held Nathan during the storm and let him see her fear, the way she'd chosen to be vulnerable and honest even when it would have been easier to hide. He thought about the life they'd been building, fragile and new but more real than anything he'd felt since Sarah died. Yeah, buddy, I think she is. Then we should wait. But Dad, if she doesn't come back, we're going to be really sad, right? Probably. But that's the risk you take when you care about someone. They might hurt you, even if they don't mean to. We just have to decide if the possibility of having her in our lives is worth the risk of losing her. Charlie considered this with the gravity of someone much older. I think it is. Because even if she doesn't come back, we got to know her, and that was good. Like how we're still glad we knew Mom even though she died. Nathan pulled his son into a tight hug, overwhelmed by the resilience and wisdom of this small person he was raising. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice because you're tall and I'm short. Nathan laughed through his tears and held Charlie until his son squirmed away to return to his spaceship construction. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Isabel. Talk to Charlie. We're willing to wait. 2 months. But Isabel, don't make promises you can't keep. Not to him. Her response came quickly. I won't. I promise. And I know what that word means to you, to both of you. I'm coming back. September 30th at the latest. Mark your calendar. Nathan did mark his calendar, drawing a big red circle around September 30th and writing Isabel comes home in the date box. Then he took a photo and sent it to her. She sent back a picture of her own calendar, same red circle, same words. Below it she'd written, I love you. I'm sorry this is hard. Thank you for waiting. Nathan stared at those words. I love you. For a long time. He hadn't said it back yet. Wasn't sure he was ready to put that weight into the universe. But looking at the calendar, at the promise circled in red, he typed, I love you too. Come home safe. The following 2 weeks established a new rhythm. Isabel called every evening at Charlie's bedtime, talking to him about his day and reading him stories over video chat when Nathan had to work late. On weekends, she'd stay on the call for hours, just existing in their digital space while they went about their lives. Nathan cooking dinner while she worked on her laptop, Charlie building Legos while she offered design suggestions. The media attention began to die down, just as Isabel had predicted. A celebrity scandal involving a senator and a pop star took over the news cycle, and suddenly Nathan and Isabel's small-town romance wasn't interesting enough to warrant continued coverage. The reporters stopped calling. The photographers moved on to more lucrative subjects. Willow Bay settled back into its normal rhythms, though Nathan noticed a shift in how people treated him. There was a new respect in their eyes, an acknowledgement that Nathan Cole had taken a risk, had stood by his choices in the face of public scrutiny, and had come out the other side with his integrity intact. "You handled that well," Tom said one afternoon when Nathan stopped by the hardware store for supplies. "A lot of men would have run scared when the cameras showed up, but you stood your ground." "Didn't feel like I had much choice," Nathan admitted. "There's always a choice. You chose love over fear. That takes guts." Tom rang up his purchase, then added quietly, "Sarah would have liked her, I think. Isabel. She's different, but good different." The observation stayed with Nathan as he drove back to the Morrison place. He'd been so worried about betraying Sarah's memory by falling for someone else that he'd never really considered whether Sarah would have approved of Isabel. But Tom was right. Sarah had always pushed Nathan to take risks, to step outside his comfort zone, to choose the harder right over the easier wrong. Isabel embodied all of those things. 3 weeks into Isabel's absence, she surprised them by showing up on a Friday evening. Nathan and Charlie were making pizza when a car pulled into the driveway, and Isabel emerged looking exhausted but radiantly happy. Charlie screamed and launched himself at her, wrapping his small body around her legs with the force of a missile. Isabel laughed and cried simultaneously, scooping him up despite the fact that he was getting too big for such gestures. "You came back! I knew you would!" Charlie's face was buried in her shoulder. "I promised, didn't I?" She looked over Charlie's head at Nathan, her eyes asking a question he answered by crossing the distance and pulling them both into his arms. They stood there in a three-way embrace, pizza forgotten, just breathing together and holding on. When they finally separated, Isabel wiped her eyes and smiled. "I can only stay until Sunday. But I needed to see you both, needed to remember why I'm doing all of this." They ate pizza on Nathan's small back porch, Charlie chattering about everything Isabel had missed, a field trip to the science center, the new swimming stroke he'd learned, the fact that his teacher said he was reading at a 4th grade level. Isabel listened with complete attention, asking questions and offering praise, making Charlie glow with the recognition. After Charlie went to bed, Nathan and Isabel finally had time alone. They sat on his couch, Isabel's head on his shoulder, both of them too tired for anything but the comfort of proximity. "How's it really going?" Nathan asked. "Hard, exhausting, but progress is happening. I've promoted my COO to co-CEO, which has taken some of the daily pressure off. We've implemented new systems that let me work remotely for most things. And I've started interviewing candidates for a permanent CEO position." Nathan pulled back to look at her. "You're stepping down?" "Not completely. I'll stay on as board chair, maintain strategic oversight. But I can't run the day-to-day operations from Willow Bay, and I don't want to live in New York anymore. So I'm building a structure that lets me do both, honor my responsibility to the company and build a life here with you." That's a huge decision. It's the right decision. Nathan, I've spent 20 years building that company, trying to prove something to a dead man. And in 2 months with you and Charlie, I felt more alive, more myself than in all those years of corporate success. She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "I'm not giving up my career. I'm reshaping it into something sustainable, something that leaves room for the rest of my life." Nathan kissed her, trying to convey through touch everything he felt: gratitude, love, hope, fear, all of it tangled together. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I was terrified you wouldn't come back, that the corporate world would pull you back in and you'd realize this was all just a nice fantasy." "I was terrified of the same thing, but then I'd talk to Charlie about space whales or hear your voice on the phone and remember that this isn't fantasy. It's the first real thing I've had in years. Everything else is just noise." She stayed through the weekend, and they fell into an easy domesticity that felt simultaneously new and ancient. Saturday morning, pancakes with Charlie, an afternoon working together on the Morrison place while Charlie explored the woods, evening walks along the lake discussing everything and nothing. It was mundane and perfect, and when Sunday afternoon came and Isabel had to leave again, the goodbye felt less terrifying than before. 5 more weeks, she said, kissing Nathan at the airport. I'll come back one more weekend in August, and then September 30th. I'm home for good. We'll be counting the days. So will I. The subsequent weeks passed in a blur of work, parenting, and daily video calls with Isabel. Nathan finished the bathroom renovation and started on the boathouse conversion, designing a studio space that would serve as Isabel's home office when she returned. Charlie started second grade with the same teacher he'd had for first, and he proudly told everyone that his dad's girlfriend was coming back soon to live with them, a presumption Nathan didn't correct because it felt true, even though they hadn't explicitly discussed living arrangements. Linda helped Nathan clean out his spare room, which had become a storage space for things he couldn't bear to throw away but didn't know what to do with. Sarah's art supplies, boxes of photos, clothes that didn't fit anyone but held too many memories to donate. Together, they sorted through it all, keeping what mattered and letting go of what didn't, making space for a future that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. "You're really doing this," Linda said, folding one of Sarah's favorite sweaters into a donation box. "Building a new life." "Trying to, is that okay?" "Honey, it's more than okay. It's exactly what you should be doing." She squeezed his hand. "Sarah would want you to be happy. She'd want Charlie to have a mother figure who loves him, and she'd probably tell you to stop asking for permission to move forward." Nathan laughed because it was true. Sarah had never been one for hesitation or second-guessing. She'd lived boldly, loved fiercely, and would absolutely tell him to stop overthinking and just embrace what was happening. Isabel's second visit came the last weekend of August. This time, Nathan picked her up from the airport with Charlie in tow, and his son spent the entire drive explaining his elaborate plan for their weekend, which involved a hike, a movie, teaching Isabel how to skip rocks, and maybe building a fort if there's time. Isabel listened to the detailed itinerary with solemn attention, then looked at Nathan with an expression of pure joy. "Your son is going to run us both into the ground." "Definitely, but it'll be fun." It was. They did everything on Charlie's list and more, cramming 2 days full of the kind of family activities that felt precious in their ordinariness. Sunday evening came too quickly, and this time when Isabel had to leave, Charlie cried openly, making her promise at least 5 times that she'd be back in 30 days. "I promise, sweetheart, September 30th. Mark it on your calendar." After Isabel left, Nathan found Charlie in his room, staring at the calendar where he'd circled the date in green marker. 30 days is a long time, Charlie said. "It is, but it's not forever, and then she'll be here to stay." "Dad, when she comes back, is she going to live here, with us?" Nathan sat on the edge of Charlie's bed. "We haven't talked about that yet." "Would you want her to?" "Yeah, I think so. I mean, if she's going to be here all the time anyway, it makes sense, right? And then we could all have breakfast together every day, and she could help with homework, and you wouldn't be lonely anymore." "I'm not lonely, buddy. I have you." "I know. But you're different when Isabel's here. Happier. You smile more and don't have that worried look you get sometimes when you think I'm not watching." Nathan pulled his son into a hug, amazed once again by how much this small person saw and understood. "When Isabel comes back, we'll all talk about what makes sense. But Charlie, even if she doesn't live here right away, that doesn't mean she's not part of our family now, okay?" "Okay. But I think she should live here, just so you know my vote." "Noted." The final 30 days crawled and flew simultaneously. Nathan worked on finishing the boathouse studio, installing proper lighting and insulation, building custom shelves for the art supplies Isabel had mentioned wanting to explore again. He repainted the spare room in the Morrison place, which Isabel had designated as Charlie's room for when he stayed over. He bought new sheets and towels and stocked the kitchen with Charlie's favorite snacks. He was building a life for 3 instead of 2, and the rightness of it settled into his bones despite the persistent fear that something could still go wrong. Isabel called every night without fail. Sometimes they talked for hours about everything: her progress on the CEO transition, Charlie's latest school project, Nathan's plans for winter work when construction slowed down. Other times they just existed in comfortable silence, her working on her laptop while Nathan sketched plans for future projects, the digital connection making the physical distance bearable. "I handed in my resignation as CEO today," she said one evening in mid-September. "Official effective date is September 30th. How do you feel about that?" Terrified. Relieved, like I'm jumping off a cliff and hoping I can fly. She laughed shakily. I've been CEO for 15 years, Nathan. It's been my entire identity since my father died. And now I'm just not. You're not just not anything. You're still board chair, still an investor, still someone with wisdom and experience. You're just choosing to be those things in a way that also leaves room to be other things. A partner, a parent figure to Charlie, a person with a life outside of conference rooms. When did you get so wise? I've been taking notes from a very smart 7-year-old who has opinions about everything. They talked about logistics then, where Isabel would stay when she first got back, the Morrison place to give everyone space to adjust, how to handle the public nature of her presence in town, honestly and without apology, what to tell Charlie about their relationship, that they loved each other and were building something together, details to be determined. I want to do this right, Isabel said seriously. With you, with Charlie, with integrating into Willow Bay. I don't want to bulldoze in with money and privilege and change everything to suit me. This is your home, your community. I'm the newcomer. You're not a newcomer anymore. You're someone who bought a house here, hired local contractors, shops at Tom's hardware store, and is dating a local carpenter. That makes you part of the fabric of this place, whether you realize it or not. I hope so. I want to belong here. I've never belonged anywhere before. Nathan understood that feeling intimately. After Sarah died, he'd felt unmoored from his own life, like he was going through the motions without actually being present. Isabel had given him a reason to be present again, to engage with the world instead of just surviving it. You belong here, he said firmly. You belong with us. And in 30 days minus however many we've already counted, you'll be home for good. 22 days, Isabel said. But who's counting? Apparently both of us. September 30th dawned clear and bright, the kind of early autumn day that felt like a gift. Nathan took the day off work, much to Charlie's delight, and they spent the morning cleaning the house and making a welcome home sign that Charlie decorated with drawings of spaceships and lake monsters. Isabel's plane landed at 2 in the afternoon. Nathan and Charlie were waiting at the small regional airport, both of them vibrating with barely contained excitement. When she finally emerged from the terminal, pulling a suitcase and looking simultaneously exhausted and radiant, Charlie broke free of Nathan's hand and ran to her. She dropped everything to catch him, lifting him up despite the awkward angle and the fact that he really was getting too big for such gestures. Nathan followed more slowly, taking in the sight of them, his son, and this woman who'd somehow become essential to both their lives. When Isabel finally set Charlie down and turned to Nathan, her eyes were shining with tears. I'm home. Yeah, Nathan said, pulling her into his arms. You are. They stood there in the airport holding each other while travelers streamed around them, neither caring about the public display or the time passing. This was the moment they'd been counting toward for 2 months, the promise finally fulfilled. Okay, Charlie said, tugging at both their hands. Okay, this is nice, but can we go home now? I want to show Isabel my new Lego set, and I made cookies, and they're probably getting stale. Isabel laughed, wiping her eyes. Lead the way, Space Explorer. They drove back to Willow Bay through the golden afternoon light, Charlie narrating every landmark they passed, as if Isabel hadn't seen them all before. But she listened with complete attention, asking questions and making comments, relearning the geography of the place she'd chosen to call home. At Nathan's house, they ate slightly stale cookies and drank milk, and Isabel admired Charlie's new Lego construction with the seriousness it deserved. Then, as evening approached, she turned to Nathan with a question in her eyes. Can we go see the lake house? I want to see the boathouse studio you've been working on. They piled into Nathan's truck and drove to the Morrison place. Isabel's place now, he reminded himself. The house looked beautiful in the fading light, all the repairs complete, the decks solid and welcoming, the dock stretching into the calm water. Nathan led her around back to the converted boathouse, opening the door to reveal the space he'd created. Light streamed through new windows. Custom shelves lined the walls, ready for books and art supplies. A desk sat positioned to overlook the water. It was everything she'd asked for, and more. A space designed for creation and contemplation, for building a life instead of just managing one. Nathan, Isabel breathed, turning in a slow circle. This is perfect. It's for you, for when you need quiet space to work or think or make art again. She crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. Thank you. For this, for waiting, for believing I'd come back. Thank you for giving me something worth coming back to. Nathan kissed her, pouring 2 months of longing and fear and hope into the contact. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he said the words he'd been holding on to. Move in with us. Not right away if you need more time, but soon. Build this life with Charlie and me, not as a guest or a visitor, but as family. Isabel's eyes widened. Nathan, are you sure? That's a huge step. I'm sure. Charlie's sure. He's been lobbying for this for weeks. We want you there, in our home, in our daily lives. Not just on weekends or special occasions, but in the mundane moments that actually matter. What about Sarah? Her memory, I mean. Does it feel wrong to have me in the house you shared with her? Nathan had thought about this a lot over the past weeks, had talked it through with his therapist and with Linda. Sarah's gone, and I'll always love the life we had. But she's not coming back, and I can't preserve our house like a museum to what was. I have to live in it, make new memories, let it evolve into something that reflects who Charlie and I are now. And who we are now includes you. Isabel was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. Yes. God, yes. I'll move in. Maybe give me a month to settle some final business details and move my things from New York. But then yes. I want to wake up with you every morning, make breakfast with Charlie, fight over whose turn it is to do the dishes. I want all of it. They sealed it with a kiss that turned into several kisses, until Charlie's voice from the dock interrupted them. Are you guys done being mushy? Because I want to skip rocks and it's almost dark. They laughed and joined him at the dock, 3 figures silhouetted against the setting sun, beginning the next chapter of a story that no longer felt impossible. That first month of Isabel being back felt like learning a new language, one made of shared routines and small compromises, of figuring out how 3 separate lives could braid together into something cohesive. She stayed at the Morrison place initially, giving everyone space to adjust, but spent most of her waking hours at Nathan's house, slowly inserting herself into the rhythm of their days. She learned that Charlie needed exactly 7 minutes of warning before transitions, that Nathan drank his coffee black but liked his tea with honey, that Thursday nights were for pizza and movie marathons. They learned that Isabel was useless before her second cup of coffee, that she organized everything by color because it made her feel in control, that she cried during commercials featuring dogs but remained stoic through actual sad movies. You're a mystery, Nathan said one morning, watching her sort Charlie's crayons by shade instead of just dumping them in the box. I'm really not. I'm just someone who spent 20 years controlling every variable in high-stakes business deals. Organizing crayons is soothing. She held up 2 greens that looked identical to Nathan. See? This one is Forrest and this one is Kelly, completely different. If you say so. Charlie loved having Isabel around with an enthusiasm that sometimes worried Nathan. His son had accepted her presence so completely, so immediately, that Nathan feared what would happen if something went wrong. But his therapist reminded him that children were resilient, that Charlie's capacity to love again after loss was a strength, not a vulnerability. He's not replacing his mother, Dr. Morrison had said during one of Nathan's sessions. He's expanding his definition of family. That's healthy, Nathan. Let him. So Nathan tried to relax into it, to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. He watched Isabel help Charlie with his math homework, her patience infinite as she explained fractions using pizza slices. He listened to them debate whether aliens would prefer dogs or cats as pets, both of them completely serious in their arguments. He came home from job sites to find them building elaborate blanket forts or conducting science experiments that usually resulted in messes he'd have to clean up. She fits, Linda observed one afternoon when she stopped by and found Isabel and Charlie making cookies. I wasn't sure she would, her being from such a different world, but she fits here, with you two. I know, Nathan said, watching Isabel show Charlie how to properly cream butter and sugar. Sometimes I'm still waiting to wake up and find out this was all just a really good dream. It's not a dream, honey. It's just life finally giving you something good after taking so much away. 3 weeks into October, Isabel's belongings arrived from New York. An entire moving truck full of furniture and art and the accumulated possessions of a 40-year life. Nathan helped her sort through it all, deciding what would stay at the Morrison place and what would come to his house when she officially moved in. "I don't need most of this," Isabel said, looking at a leather couch that probably cost more than Nathan's truck. It was all chosen by an interior designer to project success and sophistication, but none of it actually means anything to me. So sell it, donate it, whatever you want, but keep the things that matter. She kept her father's desk, the art supplies she'd abandoned after college, a collection of first edition poetry books, and the quilt her grandmother had made. Everything else she donated to various charities, much to the delight of Willow Bay's thrift store, which suddenly had furniture nice enough to be in a design magazine. "I feel lighter," she said after the last donation truck pulled away, "like I'm shedding a skin that never quite fit." "Who do you want to be now that you're not CEO Isabel Vaughn?" She considered the question seriously. "I think I want to be someone who makes things, not deals or strategies, but actual tangible things. I've been thinking about taking a painting class, maybe learning pottery. And I want to get involved in the community, maybe volunteer at Charlie's school or help with the town historical society." "The historical society would love you. Mrs. Patterson has been running it solo for years." "Then I'll talk to her. I want to be useful here, Nathan, not just someone who bought a big house and throws money at problems." The transition wasn't always smooth. There were moments when Isabel's corporate habits clashed with the casual pace of small-town life, like when she tried to schedule a family meeting to discuss household responsibilities, and Nathan had to gently explain that they could just talk about things as they came up, or when she researched schools for Charlie with the intensity of someone vetting a business acquisition, until Nathan reminded her that Willow Bay only had one elementary school, and Charlie was happy there. "I'm trying too hard, aren't I?" she asked after Nathan found her making a spreadsheet of Charlie's extracurricular options. "A little, but it comes from a good place. You want to do this right. I spent my whole career optimizing systems and maximizing efficiency. It's hard to turn that off and just be. So, practice. Charlie needs a parent, not a project manager. And I need a partner, not someone trying to fix my life." Isabel nodded, closing her laptop with visible effort. "You're right. I'm sorry. It's just that you and Charlie are the most important thing in my life, and I'm terrified of screwing it up." "Then screw it up. Make mistakes, apologize, learn from them. That's what parenting is, just an endless series of trying your best and occasionally failing and trying again." She took his advice to heart, consciously working to be present instead of productive, to accept that family life was messy and imperfect and couldn't be optimized. And slowly, the rigid edges of her corporate persona softened into something more authentic. Charlie's 8th birthday in early November became a milestone for all of them. Isabel insisted on helping plan the party, but deferred to Nathan and Charlie on the actual decisions, contributing ideas without taking over. They settled on a space-themed celebration at the local community center, with decorations Charlie helped make and a cake shaped like Saturn that Isabel and Nathan spent an entire evening constructing. The party was chaos in the best way. 15 second graders hopped up on sugar, running relay races and hunting for moon rocks Isabel had painted and hidden around the building. Linda watched her son-in-law and his girlfriend manage the controlled chaos with an expression of quiet joy. "Sarah would have loved this," she said to Nathan during a quiet moment. "The noise, the mess, how happy Charlie is. She would have loved seeing him so whole after everything he's been through." "Do you think she'd be okay with Isabel?" "Really?" Linda squeezed his arm. "I think she'd be grateful that Charlie has another adult who loves him fiercely, and I think she'd tell you to stop asking for permission to be happy and just accept the gift you've been given." That night, after the party was cleaned up and Charlie was crashed out in bed surrounded by new toys, Nathan found Isabel on his back porch, wrapped in a blanket and staring at the stars. "Hey, you okay?" "More than okay. I was just thinking about how different my life is from a year ago. Last November, I was in the middle of the board fight, barely sleeping, convinced that if I could just win, I'd feel successful and complete." She looked up at him with eyes that shone in the porch light. "But today, helping throw a birthday party for an 8-year-old, Watching him open presents, seeing his face when he blew out his candles, that felt more like success than any deal I ever closed. Nathan sat beside her, pulling her close. You did good today. Charlie loved every minute. He asked me earlier if I was going to be his mom now. Not like replacing his real mom, but like having a second one. Her voice cracked. Nathan, I didn't know what to say. I froze. What did you want to say? That, yes, if he wants me to be, I would be honored. That I love him like he's my own, even though I didn't give birth to him. That being his mother would be the most important thing I've ever done. She wiped her eyes. But I was afraid that was overstepping, that you wouldn't want me taking that role, that his grandmother would be hurt. What did you actually say? I said that I loved him very much, and that we're a family now, and families come in all different shapes, that he gets to decide what to call me and what our relationship looks like. Was that okay? Nathan kissed her temple. That was perfect, and for what it's worth, I think you'd be an amazing mother to him. Not replacing Sarah, nobody could. But being another person who loves him unconditionally and shows up for him every day, if that's what you want. It is what I want, more than anything. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Finally, Nathan spoke again. Move in with us. For real this time. We've been doing this weird half-in thing for weeks, and it's working, but I want you here fully. I want to wake up with you every morning and go to sleep with you every night. I want your art supplies cluttering up the spare room and your fancy coffee maker on my counter and your presence woven into every part of our lives. Isabel turned to look at him, her expression vulnerable. Are you sure? That's a big commitment, especially with Charlie involved. I've never been more sure of anything. Isabel, you're already part of our family. The only thing that changes is where you keep your toothbrush. She laughed through her tears. Okay, yes, let's do it. When? How about next weekend? We can move your essential stuff from the Morrison place, set up the spare room as your office and studio, make it official. What do we tell people? The truth. That we love each other and we're building a life together. That my girlfriend is moving in because it makes sense for our family. It's nobody's business beyond that. The town is going to talk. Let them. They'll talk for a week and then move on to something else. That's how small towns work. Constant interest in everyone's business, but also constant acceptance once they get used to the idea. Isabel moved in the following Saturday with the help of Tom, Linda, and a few of Nathan's friends from the contracting community. The whole operation took about 3 hours, and by the end of it, Isabel's clothes were in Nathan's closet, her books were on his shelves, and her presence had officially transformed his house from a place he lived to a home they shared. Charlie helped arrange her art supplies in the spare room with the seriousness of a museum curator, asking about each item and deciding where it should go based on what he determined was artistic logic. This easel should be by the window for good light, he declared. And these paints need to be organized by warm colors and cool colors, because that's how real artists do it. How do you know how real artists do it? Isabel asked, charmed. I saw it on a show. Also, it just makes sense. You can't put orange next to blue. They're opposites. Actually, complementary colors like orange and blue look beautiful together. But I like your organizational system better. Let's do it your way. Charlie beamed and Nathan watched from the doorway with a full heart. This was his family now, not the family he'd planned for, not the family he'd lost, but the family he'd found when he stopped trying to control the future and just let life unfold. That evening, the three of them made dinner together in a kitchen that suddenly felt too small for their collective energy. Isabel chopped vegetables while Nathan handled the stove, and Charlie set the table with extreme precision, making sure the forks and knives were perfectly aligned. This is nice, Charlie announced as they sat down to eat. Having 3 people makes dinner better. It's not too quiet like before. Before was fine, Nathan said gently. It was just different. I know, but this is good too. Better, maybe. Is that okay to say? Nathan looked at Isabel, saw his own emotion reflected in her eyes. Yeah, buddy, that's okay to say. Change can be good. Over the following weeks, they settled into their new configuration with surprising ease. Isabel established a remote work schedule that let her handle her board responsibilities while still being present for school pickups and family dinners. She converted the boathouse at the Morrison place into a proper art studio and started painting again, tentative at first. then with growing confidence as muscle memory and instinct took over from years of disuse. Her first completed painting was of the lake at sunset, all gold and purple and reflecting light. She gave it to Nathan for Christmas, and he hung it in the living room where Sarah's photos used to be the only art. The past and present existed together now, neither erasing the other. Willow Bay absorbed Isabel into its fabric with the gradual acceptance of a small town. She joined the Historical Society and helped digitize their archives. She volunteered in Charlie's classroom once a week, reading to students and helping with art projects. She became a regular at Tom's hardware store, learning about tools and materials with the same intensity she'd once applied to corporate acquisitions. "She's good people," Tom told Nathan one afternoon. "Doesn't act like her money makes her special. Treats everyone the same." "That's because it doesn't make her special," Nathan replied. "The money is just details. Who she is underneath, that's what matters." Not everyone was immediately accepting. There were still whispers about the rich outsider who'd bought her way into Nathan Cole's life, speculation about whether it would last, judgment about moving in together without being married. But the criticism was muted by the visible evidence of their happiness, and by the fact that Isabel won people over one genuine interaction at a time. Mrs. Patterson, the Historical Society president and unofficial town matriarch, became an unexpected ally after Isabel spent an entire weekend helping reorganize the society's storage system and then donated funds to repair the historical museum's roof. "She's got a good heart," Mrs. Patterson declared at the town council meeting, effectively silencing any remaining gossips. "And Nathan Cole deserves happiness after what he's been through. I won't hear another word against them." Winter came to Willow Bay with its usual force. Snow blanketing the lake, temperatures dropping below freezing, the landscape transforming into something stark and beautiful. Nathan's work slowed as construction became difficult in the cold, which meant more time at home, more family dinners, more evenings spent by the fire, while Charlie did homework and Isabel painted and Nathan sketched plans for spring projects. "I love this," Isabel said one evening in late January, looking up from her canvas to survey the domestic scene. "The quiet, the togetherness, the not having anywhere else to be. I spent so many years running from silence, afraid that if I stopped moving, I'd have to face things I didn't want to face. But this silence is different. It's full instead of empty." "What were you running from?" Nathan asked. "Myself, mostly. The knowledge that I'd built an impressive life that didn't actually make me happy. That I'd sacrificed relationships and joy and authenticity for success that felt hollow." She set down her brush. "My therapist asked me once what I was afraid would happen if I stopped achieving, and I realized I was afraid I'd discover that without the accomplishments, there was nothing interesting about me. And now? Now I know that's bullshit. The most interesting thing about me isn't what I built or achieved. It's how I love, how I show up, how I'm learning to be present and vulnerable and real." She gestured at the painting in progress. "This isn't going to sell for millions or hang in a museum, but it's mine in a way the company never was. I made it because I wanted to, because creating something brings me joy." Charlie looked up from his math homework. "Can I see?" Isabel turned the canvas so he could view it. A portrait of Nathan and Charlie on the dock, both of them silhouetted against the summer sunset, the lines loose and emotional rather than precisely realistic. "That's us," Charlie breathed. "Isabel, that's really good. You should make more." "I plan to. I'm thinking of teaching an art class at the community center in the spring, for kids and adults who want to learn but think they're not talented enough." "Everyone's talented enough," Charlie said with the certainty of an 8-year-old. "They just have to practice. That's what my teacher says about math." "Your teacher is very wise." February brought Nathan's birthday and a surprise party that Isabel and Linda had been planning in secret for weeks. Nathan arrived home from a job site to find his house full of friends, neighbors, and clients, all gathered to celebrate a man who'd become woven into the fabric of Willow Bay through years of quiet service and genuine kindness. "You did this?" he asked Isabel, taking in the decorations and catered food and the cake that was clearly from the expensive bakery 2 towns over. "Linda and I collaborated. She provided the guest list and the stories. I provided the logistics and the bribery of your son to keep the secret." Isabel kissed his cheek. "Happy birthday, Nathan. You deserve to be celebrated." The party was loud and warm and full of people who'd known Nathan since he was Charlie's age, people who'd held him through his grief and were now celebrating his joy. Tom made a speech about Nathan's craftsmanship and integrity. Linda talked about what a good father he was, how proud Sarah would be of the man he'd become. Even Mrs. Patterson stood up to declare that Nathan Cole was the kind of man who made Willow Bay special, someone who built things that lasted, who showed up when needed, who loved fiercely and honestly. Nathan couldn't speak through his emotion, just nodded his thanks and pulled Isabel and Charlie close, overwhelmed by how much his life had changed in less than a year. Last February, he'd been surviving, going through the motions, convinced that contentment was the best he could hope for. Now he was thriving, building a future he'd never imagined, surrounded by love he'd thought was gone forever. Later, after everyone had left and Charlie was asleep, Nathan and Isabel sat on the couch with the lights dimmed and the remnants of cake on plates beside them. "Thank you," Nathan said, "for tonight, for everything, for choosing this life when you could have had anything." "This life chose me back," Isabel replied. "That's what makes it real. I didn't just want you and Charlie. I needed you. You reminded me what it feels like to be human instead of just successful." Nathan pulled a small box from his pocket, his hands shaking slightly. "I was going to wait until summer, make it romantic with a sunset on the dock, but tonight felt right, surrounded by everyone who matters." Isabel's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a simple diamond ring, not ostentatious or flashy, just beautiful in its understated elegance. "I know we've only been together for 8 months. I know people will say it's too fast, too risky, that we should wait. But Isabel, I don't want to wait. I want to marry you, build a legal family with you and Charlie, make this permanent in every way that matters. Will you marry me?" Isabel was crying, her hands covering her mouth. "Nathan, are you sure? I'm 40. I'm complicated. I come with corporate baggage and probably more emotional issues than we've even discovered yet. And I'm a widower with a kid and a small-town life that must seem impossibly boring compared to what you're used to. So what? None of that matters." He took her hand, sliding the ring onto her finger. "What matters is that I love you, and you love me, and together we're building something real. So yes, I'm sure. Are you?" "Yes," she whispered. "God, yes, I'll marry you." They kissed with the ring between them, sealing a promise that had started with a phone call about deck repairs and had transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated. When they finally pulled apart, both crying and laughing, Isabel looked at the ring on her finger with wonder. "Should we tell Charlie?" "Tomorrow. Let's let him sleep tonight. Besides, I want you to myself for a few more hours." They stayed up late, talking about the future. A small wedding in the summer, maybe on the dock where they'd first really connected. Whether to hyphenate names or keep their own. How to handle the press when news inevitably leaked. Whether to have children together, and what that might look like given their ages and circumstances. "I never thought I'd get this chance," Isabel admitted. "Motherhood, marriage, that's actually partnership. A life built on love instead of obligation. I thought I'd miss the window for all of that." "You didn't miss anything. You were just taking the long way around." Nathan kissed her forehead. "And now you're here, and we get to figure out the rest together." Morning came with Charlie's usual exuberant entrance into their bedroom, launching himself onto the bed with the force of a small asteroid. "Dad! Isabel! It's Saturday! Can we have pancakes? Can we go to the lake even though it's cold? Can we—" He stopped mid-sentence, having spotted the ring on Isabel's hand. "What's that?" Nathan and Isabel exchanged glances. They'd planned to ease into the conversation, but Charlie's observation skills had always been formidable. "Buddy, Isabel and I have something to tell you," Nathan started. "You know how much we love each other, right?" "Duh. You smile all goofy all the time." "Right. Well, I asked Isabel to marry me last night, and she said yes, which means we're going to be a family in an official, legal way. How do you feel about that?" Charlie's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, consideration, and then pure joy. "Does that mean Isabel will be my stepmom? Like, officially?" "If that's okay with you," Isabel said carefully. "You can call me Isabel, or you can call me Mom, or you can call me something else entirely. We'll figure it out together." Can I think about it? Of course. Charlie was quiet for a moment, his 8-year-old brain processing this major change. Finally, he spoke. I think I'd like to call you Mom. Not all the time, maybe, but sometimes. Because you do mom things like help with homework and make me eat vegetables and hug me when I'm sad. But my first mom will always be my mom too, right? Isabel's eyes filled with tears. Always. Your first mom loved you so much, Charlie, and nothing about me being in your life changes that or takes away from what you had with her. I know. Dad explained that you can love multiple people without it being less. Charlie crawled between them, creating a Charlie sandwich. So when's the wedding? Can I be in it? Can we have cake? Space-themed cake? Nathan laughed, ruffling his son's hair. We'll figure all that out. But yes, you'll definitely be in it. You're the most important person in this whole equation. Cool. Now can we have pancakes? They made pancakes together, the three of them moving around the kitchen with practiced ease. Charlie mixed the batter while Nathan heated the griddle and Isabel sliced strawberries, and the whole scene felt like a painting of domestic contentment. Linda came by later that afternoon, ostensibly to return a dish, but really to check on how the birthday party cleanup had gone. She spotted the ring immediately, her eyes going wide. Nathan Cole, did you? Last night. She said yes. Linda pulled them both into a fierce hug, crying happy tears. Sarah would be so happy for you both. She'd be proud of how you've rebuilt your life, Nathan. And Isabel, she'd have loved you for how you love her boys. Thank you, Isabel said, meaning it. Your blessing means everything. You've had it for months, honey. I've been waiting for Nathan to get up the nerve to propose. Linda wiped her eyes and turned to Charlie. And how are you doing with all this, Mr. Charlie? Good. I'm going to be in the wedding, and maybe there will be space cake, and Isabel said I can call her Mom if I want to. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your family is just growing, that's all. You're lucky to have so many people who love you. I know, Charlie said with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted he was loved. I'm the luckiest kid in Willow Bay, maybe in the whole world. The engagement announcement went public through the natural osmosis of small-town life rather than any official statement. By Monday, everyone in Willow Bay knew that Nathan Cole and Isabel Vaughn were getting married. The business press picked it up within days, running headlines about the fallen CEO and her small-town redemption romance. But the coverage was softer this time, more interested in the human story than the scandal. Isabel handled the media attention with grace, giving one carefully worded statement to the press. I'm marrying the love of my life and becoming a mother to an extraordinary child. That's the only story that matters to me. They set the wedding for late June, giving them time to plan, but not so much time that the anticipation became stressful. Isabel wanted simple and meaningful, just close friends and family, a ceremony on the dock at sunset, a reception in Nathan's backyard. No celebrity photographers, no corporate guests included out of obligation, just the people who actually mattered. I spent my entire first wedding trying to impress people, she told Nathan during one of their planning sessions. This time, I just want to marry you. Everything else is decoration. Spring came to Willow Bay with its usual explosion of green and birdsong. Nathan's business picked up as the weather warmed and he found himself turning down jobs for the first time in years. He had enough work to be selective, to choose projects that interested him rather than just taking everything offered. Isabel launched her art class at the community center, teaching watercolors to a mixed group of retirees and young parents looking for creative outlets. She discovered she loved teaching, loved watching people discover their own capabilities, loved creating a space where making mistakes was part of the process rather than something to be ashamed of. You're good at this, Nathan observed one evening after watching her teach. Patient, encouraging, but also honest about what needs improvement. It's not that different from mentoring junior executives, actually. People are people. They all need someone to believe in them and push them to be better. She cleaned her brushes thoughtfully. I think this might be what I want to do long term. Not just painting, but teaching it. Creating space for other people to find their creativity. Then do it. Open a proper studio, expand the classes, make it a business if you want, or keep it casual if that feels better. You've got the resources and the skill. I might. After the wedding, once we settle into being married and I see how the board chair role balances with everything else, she turned to him with a soft smile. I never thought I'd be planning a business based on what brings me joy instead of what's most profitable. You've changed how I see the world, Nathan. You've changed how I see it too. Before you, I was content with small and safe. Now I'm thinking about expanding my business, maybe taking on an apprentice, building something bigger than just survival. They were pushing each other to grow, to dream beyond what they'd settled for. It was one of the things Nathan loved most about their relationship. They didn't diminish each other to feel secure. They elevated each other because they believed in what the other could become. Charlie's school year ended with an award ceremony where he received recognition for reading achievement and scientific curiosity. Both Nathan and Isabel attended, sitting in the two small cafeteria chairs and beaming with pride as Charlie accepted his certificates with serious dignity. "That's my son," Nathan whispered to Isabel. "That's our son," she corrected, and the possessive pronoun settled into Nathan's chest like a warmth that wouldn't fade. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations and ordinary life happening simultaneously. Isabel's dress was simple ivory linen, elegant and understated. Nathan bought a new suit but refused to wear a tie. "We're getting married on a dock, not in a boardroom." Charlie got a matching suit and practiced walking in dress shoes without tripping. Linda helped with flowers from her garden, creating arrangements that smelled like summer and memory. Tom built an arbor for them to stand under, simple wood construction that would stay on the dock permanently as a marker of this moment. Mrs. Patterson organized the reception logistics with military precision, recruiting half the historical society to help set up and serve. The night before the wedding, as tradition dictated, Isabel stayed at the Morrison place, while Nathan and Charlie had the house to themselves. Charlie was too excited to sleep, bouncing with energy as Nathan tried to convince him that tomorrow would come faster if he actually closed his eyes. "Dad?" Charlie said as Nathan was finally getting him settled. "Are you scared about getting married?" "A little, but good scared, like right before going on a roller coaster, scared and excited at the same time." "I'm excited too, and a little sad." Charlie's voice got smaller. "Is it okay to be sad even though I'm happy about Isabel?" Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, understanding immediately. "You're thinking about your first mom, about how she should be here for this." "Yeah, I know Isabel's great, and I love her and I want her to be my mom. But I wish my first mom could be here too. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense, buddy." Nathan pulled Charlie into a hug. "You can be happy about our new family and sad about missing your first mom at the same time. Both feelings can be true, and I think your first mom would be happy for us. She'd love that you have someone else who loves you like Isabel does." "You think Mom would like her? If they could meet?" Nathan thought about that seriously. "I think they'd be friends. They're both strong and smart and fierce about protecting the people they love. Yeah, I think they'd like each other a lot." Charlie seemed satisfied with that answer. He snuggled into his pillow, finally still. "Night, Dad. See you at the wedding." "Good night, buddy. Love you." "Love you too." The wedding day dawned perfect, warm but not hot, clear blue sky, a gentle breeze off the lake. Nathan woke early with nerves and anticipation tangled in his chest. He made coffee, got himself and Charlie dressed, and tried not to obsess over whether everything would go according to plan. The ceremony was set for 6 in the evening, timed so the sun would be low and golden, painting everything in that magical hour light. Guests started arriving around 5:30, parking along the road and making their way down to the dock where chairs had been set up facing the water. Nathan stood under Tom's arbor with Charlie beside him as his best man, watching people gather. Linda was in the front row crying already. Tom and his wife sat nearby, both smiling. Mrs. Patterson had claimed a strategic seat where she could oversee everything. Friends from Nathan's contracting jobs, parents from Charlie's school, neighbors who'd become family over years of shared proximity, all of them here to witness this new beginning. And then Isabel appeared at the end of the dock, and Nathan forgot to breathe. She walked alone, no one to give her away because she'd chosen to give herself, carrying a simple bouquet of wildflowers. Her dress moved in the breeze, her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, and she was crying and smiling simultaneously. She looked more beautiful than Nathan had ever seen her, not because of the dress or the setting, but because of the joy radiating from every part of her. The ceremony itself was short and personal. They'd written their own vows, speaking directly to each other without formality or performance. Nathan went first, his voice shaking slightly. "Isabel, 8 months ago you called me about deck repairs, and I thought I was just taking on another job. I had no idea I was about to meet the woman who would remind me what it feels like to be fully alive. You've taught me that opening your heart after loss isn't betrayal. It's courage. That building a new life doesn't erase the past. It honors it by refusing to stop living. I promise to love you honestly, to show up for you consistently, to build a life with you that's based on what's real instead of what looks good. I promise to be your partner in all things, to raise Charlie with you, to choose you every single day for the rest of my life." Isabel was crying fully now, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Nathan, I came to Willow Bay running from a life that had stopped making sense. I bought a house to hide in, hired you to fix the broken parts, and had no intention of letting anyone see the broken parts of me. But you saw them anyway, and instead of being scared off, you offered me something I'd never had: acceptance without conditions, love without performance requirements, a family built on authenticity instead of obligation. You and Charlie have given me the greatest gift, the chance to be human instead of just successful. I promise to love you with everything I have, to be a good mother to Charlie, to build a home with you where we can all be our real selves. I promise to stay even when it's hard, to choose honesty over hiding, to wake up every day grateful for this second chance at real life." There wasn't a dry eye on the dock by the time they finished. The officiant, a local judge who'd known Nathan since childhood, pronounced them married, and Nathan kissed his wife with the sunset painting them in gold. Charlie cheered and threw wildflower petals he'd been clutching, and the gathered witnesses erupted in applause. It was perfect in its imperfection. Someone's phone rang during the vows, a bird flew over at an inopportune moment. Charlie tripped slightly on his way to present the rings. But none of that mattered because the important part, the promise, the commitment, the love, that was flawless. The reception in Nathan's backyard was exactly what they'd wanted: casual, warm, full of laughter and good food and people celebrating genuine happiness. Linda made a toast about how love doesn't follow timelines or logic. It just shows up when it's ready. Tom told embarrassing stories about young Nathan that made Isabel laugh until she cried. Mrs. Patterson announced that the Historical Society was officially documenting this wedding as part of Willow Bay's ongoing history, because some love stories deserve to be remembered. Charlie gave his own toast, standing on a chair so everyone could see him. "I used to think families were just people related by blood, but Isabel taught me that families are people who choose to love each other every day. So I'm really happy that she chose us, and we chose her, and now it's official. Also, the cake is really good, and you should all have some." As the evening deepened into night and guests began to drift away, Nathan and Isabel and Charlie ended up on the dock again, the place where so much of their story had unfolded. The water was calm and dark, reflecting stars that were just beginning to appear. "We did it," Isabel said, leaning against Nathan while Charlie sat between them. "We actually built this." "We did, and it's real." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "No escape, no fantasy, just life. Messy, beautiful, real life." Charlie pointed up at the emerging stars. "Dad, do you think Mom can see us from wherever she is?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "I think if there's any way she can, she's watching, and she's happy that we're happy." "I think so too." Charlie snuggled closer to both of them. "This is a good family. I'm glad we found each other." "Me too, buddy. Me too." They sat there as darkness fully fell. Three people who'd found each other across grief and distance and fear, who'd chosen to build something real instead of just surviving. The lake lapped gently at the dock posts Nathan had rebuilt months ago, sturdy now, designed to last. Behind them, the house glowed with warm light, full of people still celebrating. Isabel had come to Willow Bay looking for escape and found something infinitely better. A home, a family, a life built on truth instead of image. Nathan had spent 3 years just surviving and found his way back to thriving. Charlie had lost his mother, but gained another who chose him deliberately and loved him fiercely. They hadn't escaped their old lives. They'd transformed them into something new, something built on honest love, shared purpose, and the courage to keep choosing each other even when it was scary. The lake house stood restored behind them, no longer empty or neglected, but filled with life and laughter and the promise of many years ahead. This was home now, not a place to hide, but a place to belong. Not an ending, but a beginning, one built board by board, day by day, choice by choice, until it became something sturdy enough to last. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the water sang its eternal song, they sat together in the life they'd built, neither of them pretending anymore.